Chapter 1630. Jiang Pingji noticed everyone's strange expressions and coughed to ease the awkwardness. Is the evidence conclusive? I'm sure it's the Nan family of Fenzhou. The Nan family of Fenzhou was a large clan in Nanxing. They had money, food, and manpower. Even Yang Tao had to give them some face and respect. In layman's terms, the Nan family of Fenzhou was a sponsor and an investor. They were a proper financial backer. Who wouldn't show some respect to a financial backer? Jiang Pingji didn't play by the rules. She offended the Nan family of Fenzhou as soon as she arrived. She used force to snatch half of their family's wealth. The fertile land they took away was confiscated. Even their ancestors' graves were repeatedly raided. Even a clay figurine would have some anger, let alone the Nan family. The Nan family was furious. Naturally, they planned to kill Jiang Pingji. They checked Jiang Pingji's schedule in advance, bribed their spies, and arranged more than 100 kamikaze warriors along the way. Jiang Pingji didn't know about all this beforehand. No matter how clear she was, she couldn't control every Tom, Dick, and Harry. It was inevitable that there would be omissions. The Nan family could set up this ambush without alerting her. Her arrogance was partly to blame, but it was mostly due to the Nan family's calculations. If Jiang Pingji didn't have the ability to fight 100, it would be a dead end for any other feudal lord. Of course, on the other hand, she dared to be so reckless because she had such strength. If others imitated her, they would most likely die without a trace. If it was another feudal lord, the Nan family's plan would have succeeded. Wei Ci asked, "How do you plan to deal with them?" The words of the kamikaze warriors can't be trusted. Send someone to investigate again. If it's really the Nan family? Jiang Pingji suddenly laughed softly. Her lips opened slightly, revealing a few white teeth. There was an inexplicable white killing intent. If we don't kill them, are we going to keep them alive for the new year? If she didn't let the people of Nanxing see the consequences of trying to kill her, they wouldn't learn their lesson. Exterminate the clan? Exterminate them? No one objected to Jiang Pingji's decision. Even if some people felt that the decision to exterminate the entire clan was too harsh, they would not make their lord unhappy because of this reason. Jiang Pingji's officials, other than the few who surrendered with Yang Tao, were mostly from Dongqing. There were fewer gentry families than commoners, especially those who were trusted by the higher-ups. The commoners had an overwhelming victory. The landowning households had the upper hand in the middle and lower levels, but they also didn't have much say. The similarity between these landowning families and the landowning families of Nanxing was that they were landowning families. Just based on these connections, it was not enough for them to plead for mercy and risk Jiang Pingji bearing a grudge against them. In terms of benefits, the Nanxing aristocrats were not on the same side as them. To sum up, if the clan was exterminated, then so be it. They weren't the ones being exterminated anyway. The Nan family's ending was decided in a few words. Next, it was time to settle the debt of Jiang Pingji's solo activities. Wei Ci and the others did not say anything harsh. They did not even criticize Jiang Pingji. Instead, they reprimanded her until she hung her head low like a teacher. If it weren't for the fact that she was the lord, Jiang Pingji really doubted that these people would ask her to write a guarantee. Why do I feel that in their eyes, my solo activities are more serious than the assassination this time? When Jiang Pingji's stomach was rumbling with hunger, she ate the cold dishes that she had not finished before. Including dinner and supper, there were a total of 3 big buckets of rice. It was already very late. She rarely streamed until so late. The salted fishes had watched her make a fool of herself the whole night, so she forced them to watch her eat. The guys in the streaming room were always full of golden sentences. Oh Shishu, if you were obedient and didn't stray from the group, the assassination would only happen once. However, you've always been unrestrained. In the future, you'll definitely encounter more than one assassination. Comparing the two, it's naturally more important to control you. Although the streamer is skilled and bold, Wei Ci and the others won't condone you endlessly if you act so recklessly, right? As time goes on, there might be people who can't stand it and become dissatisfied. The salted fishes joked around, but they were also very serious in their suggestions. Ancient strategists were a group of impenetrable goblins. They were very good when they were good, but if something did not go their way, they would simply turn their backs on you. The thinking of strategists was different from that of ordinary people. It was not impossible for them to rebel because they could not stand Jiang Pingji's actions. For example, there was a certain strategist in history who had a bad temper with his boss. He could not stand the boss's actions, so he jumped ship and trampled on her. There was often only a thin line between true fans and haters. If Jiang Pingji continued to court death, it was hard to guarantee that there would not be fans who would turn against her. In fact, many salted fishes in the streaming room had fans who turned against her. They used to love Jiang Pingji very much, but later, because of some unforeseen events, they hated her very much. These salted fishes were like this even across dimensions, let alone people who were in close contact with Jiang Pingji's bad habits every day. Jiang Pingji asked, "Is it that serious?" Many salted fishes who had entered the workplace told her with certainty that it would. If they had such a casual boss, even if the boss was powerful enough to defy the heavens and the earth, they would still jump ship after a long time. It was true that Jiang Pingji was the Lord, but she could not let her subordinates accept her unconditionally. The salted fish's words made sense. Jiang Pingji sighed and scratched her head in frustration. In the end, she chose to calmly reflect. One of her strengths was that she was not stubborn. If she was wrong, she was wrong. She would not make trouble out of nothing and insist that she was right. As she reflected, she realized that Wei Si was really angry. The crowd dispersed. He did not look for her like he usually did, nor did he help her sort out the documents for the next day. He did not even look at her. Even though such awkwardness would not last long, Jiang Pingji was still not used to it. "You Abba, you should..." Jiang Pingji knew that the old chief was lurking in the streaming room. She could not help but cover her face and say, "Am I that bad?" "You Abba, what do you think?" Jiang Pingji lay on the porch, her limbs spread wide as she basked in the moonlight. "I'm quite suspicious now. Why did you choose me as your successor back then? After all, I do have a lot of problems." "You Abba, it's rare that you, who always defy the heavens and the earth, would have doubts about yourself." Jiang Pingji choked. "You Abba, because the flaws do not obscure the gems. You do have a lot of problems, but the 7th Legion is a combat legion, not a logistical legion. The main role of the legion leader is to command and motivate the troops. Didn't you do that well? I didn't ask you to become one with the soldiers or love them like your own children, right? You just have to lead them to victory on the battlefield." Jiang Pingji said, "That way, I can be the commander of a combat legion, but I can't become the marshal, right? Your Abba, thank God. At least you know your place." Jiang Pingji could not help but facepalm. "I suddenly realized something. You once said that this was a test for me to inherit the position of marshal. If I only captured the system and made a great contribution, but my personality didn't change, I would only be rewarded with a great contribution at most. Wouldn't the position of marshal still be mine? You Abba, congratulations, blind student. You've discovered something." Jiang Pingji was speechless. For all, who was the one who painted a big picture for me?" Chapter 1631. Your Abba, do you think you're still a toddler learning how to walk? Do you need someone to teach you everything? There were some things that would only be effective if they had experienced it themselves and made up their minds to correct it. The Federation does indeed want to nurture you, but if you don't live up to expectations, it's not like they can't do without you. Besides, I've been retired for so many years, I don't want to get involved in the Federation's affairs anymore." Jiang Pingji was speechless. What he said made so much sense that she had nothing to say in response. "Your Abba, this is indeed your chance, but you can't blame anyone if you can't take it." The old chief was the same as before. Jiang Pingji sighed softly and looked at the starry sky without saying a word. She really needed to reflect. "Your Abba, it's not your fault." After all, Jiang Pingji was the successor that she had chosen herself. The old chief was patient with her. She was also clear about Jiang Pingji's strengths and weaknesses. It was not a problem for her to be the head of the army. Regardless of hardware or software, Jiang Pingji was considered top-notch. However, if she went one step further, her original advantage would become a disadvantage. If Jiang Pingji took the opportunity to reflect and correct herself, her future would be bright. What's not my fault? Your Abba. There's a huge difference between the commander of a combat army and the marshal of the Federation. It's normal that you're not used to it. Jiang Pingji scratched her head. She was suddenly curious. The old chief should be the most suitable candidate for the next marshal, right? Even if he retired, he would still be the most competitive with his experience. I heard you say that you had no choice but to retire because of your health, but the Federation's medical science is advanced. Are there any incurable diseases that they can't cure? Jiang Pingji was suddenly very curious. Why did her old boss give up on the possibility of further advancement? Even if it was because of a terminal illness, where could the medical technology be more advanced than the Federation? In addition, the old general had also mentioned the awakening. He had also revealed that the problem with her body was due to the so-called awakening. Perhaps she would be able to find her own path from him. Your Abba, you should really review the history of the Federation Army. Jiang Pingji was ridiculed, but she listened attentively. Your Abba, think about it. Among all the marshals in the Federation, other than a few at the beginning, which one of them came from a combat army? Jiang Pingji was speechless. The old general's words were double standards. He made it sound as if she wasn't from a combat division. Your Abba, do you think it's that easy to be a marshal? The difference between the two was even greater than the difference between a vassal and an emperor. The feudal vassals only needed to think about how to manage their own land, and it was fine for them to be willful once in a while. However, as an emperor, he had to consider all the people in the world. Every decision had to be carefully considered, because it could affect the fate of countless people. Similarly, the combat corps only needed to fight on the front lines. It was a blade aimed at the enemy, but the marshal was the leader who controlled the entire situation, from the front lines to the rear, no matter how big or small. The requirements of the two were not on the same level. If the army commander's requirement was 80 points, the marshal's requirement was 100 points. Jiang Pingji was speechless. She thought the old chief was going to talk about some conspiracy theory. I'm even more depressed after hearing what the old chief said. Your Abba, what are you depressed about? Jiang Pingji covered her face and said, does the Federation want to forcibly prop up a piece of mud with only 80 points of professional ability? Your Abba, if that's what you think, you're overreacting. The old chief did not know what kind of person Jiang Pingji was when she first transmigrated, but from the looks of it, she had indeed matured a lot. Any army commander in the Federation was an elite, one in a billion. For Jiang Pingji to be able to sit in this position and gain the unanimous approval of the other army commanders, it was not enough to just be good at fighting. Her other hardware and software had to be top-notch. Therefore, there was no doubt about her own excellence. To put it bluntly, what Jiang Pingji lacked was not the ability, but the mentality, responsibility, and attitude. If these were complemented, and the Federation trained and polished her for a few years or more, she would basically be qualified to be a marshal. For example, Jiang Pingji acted alone this time. Even though her original intention was to reduce the casualties of the guards, she put herself in danger. Even though the men of sacrifice could not harm her at all. No matter what, her actions brought worry and trouble to her subordinates. They were sincerely assisting her, but she treated them with such a childish attitude. Sooner or later, something bad would happen. Jiang Pingji liked to be mischievous. An appropriate amount of mischievous would make people feel closer to her, but excessive mischievous would only make people feel disgusted. If she could change for the better, curb her bad habits, and do things with more of a superior's demeanor, it would be considered a blessing in disguise. After reflecting for a long time, the old chief heard Jiang Pingji say one sentence. Sigh, Zixiao must be annoyed. Can you teach me how to coax him? You Abba, get lost. Quickly get lost. He doesn't learn from his mistakes and doesn't learn his lesson. The Federation will be doomed if we entrust him to this kind of person. Seeing the old chief fly off the handle, Jiang Pingji laughed heartily. It was as if the depression in her chest had disappeared without a trace. She lay in the corridor outside the room and slept for the whole night. In the morning, she was woken up by the maid. Why did I fall asleep here? Jiang Pingji opened her eyes in a daze. The bullet screen in the streaming room woke her up instantly. She forgot to turn off the streaming room last night. 5 million salted fish just stared at her for the whole night. The bullet screen was full of all kinds of complaints. What annoyed her the most was a particular bullet screen. These salted fish watched her sleep to see if she would freeze to death. Where were the promised fans? Each of them was more dedicated than the anti-fans. Jiang Pingji looked at the bullet screen and had an idea. She rubbed her nose and sneezed. Her eyes quickly became misty. My head is a little dizzy. I feel like the world is spinning. She didn't like people guarding outside the bedroom door when she slept. Most of them were outside the courtyard. Therefore, no one realized that Jiang Pingji slept in the corridor the whole night. It was very normal for her to fall sick in such a cold weather. That's right. She planned to use the trick of injuring herself to gain sympathy. Life was like a drama. It all depended on one's acting skills. Jiang Pingji was as strong as an ox. She had never been sick since she was young, but it didn't mean that she couldn't pretend to be sick. During her years as a genetic warrior, disguise was a compulsory course to assist in some assassination missions. Relying on her exquisite disguise, even the doctor was fooled. Wei Si and the others rushed over the moment they heard the news. Of course, Jiang Pingji wouldn't say that she slept outside in the middle of the night. She only said that she caught a cold when she woke up. The first reaction of Wei Si and the others was to question her. When they saw that she was so sick that her face was flushed and her eyes were bloodshot, their words were stuck in their throats. The salted fishes were dumbfounded by what they saw. Doesn't the streamer's conscience hurt to lie to the little angel? It turned out that pretending to be sick and weak was very effective. Everyone had some opinions at first, but now they were worried about her. Chapter 1632. A cold was something that could kill a person if it got serious. If Jiang Pingji did not die in the hands of the men of sacrifice, but instead was beheaded by a cold, it would be too ridiculous. Wang Lin frowned. Xianxia, don't you think this cold came at the right time? As long as Jiang Pingji handled it properly, the matter would be resolved in the blink of an eye. Yang Tao said, how could she pretend to be sick in front of so many doctors? It's just a minor illness. Who doesn't take some medicine? Wang Lin shook his head. Anything ordinary feels unnatural when it comes to this person. Just as Yang Tao had said, the kamikaze warriors had not harmed her at all, but she had fallen sick that night. Yang Tao laughed. Once bitten, twice shy. Lu Lanting is not that evil. Don't worry, she's human. Wang Lin rubbed his brows and said in a low voice, maybe I'm overthinking. Xiaoyang's suspicions are reasonable. Lu Lanting was ambushed in the morning and fell sick the next day. If the Nan family of Fan Prefecture hears about it, they will probably think that it's a cover-up. If they get caught because of this, the Nan family will not die a wrongful death. Wang Lin could not help but look at his friend. Not bad, this analysis actually made sense. Whether Lu Shi is really sick or not, the Nan family is doomed, Wang Lin said in a low voice. Lu Shi pretended to be sick and led his troops to attack Huang Song's rear. Now he's sick and the Nan family is digging their own grave. What a coincidence! Yang Tao could not help but ask, Xiaoyang, why do you call him by his name in private? Wang Lin said, I'm not the only one. Qian Su and a few of Yang Tao's old officials called him Lord Lu in public, but they still called him Lu Shi in private. But it was all because of Yang Tao. It was just a title. As long as Wang Lin and the others were not disloyal, Jiang Pingji would not hold it against them. Yang Tao said, I'm worried about you. Lu Lanting is sometimes broad-minded, but sometimes she's narrow-minded. Wang Lin's heart warmed. He smiled and said, I know what I'm doing. I won't give her a chance to do anything. Whether in the past or now, Wang Lin's interests were tied to Yang Tao's. Jiang Pingji had hurt Wang Lin and weakened Yang Tao. Wang Lin would never allow that to happen. At the same time, Wei Si, who had been in a one-sided Cold War with Jiang Pingji for the whole night, blew on the boiled medicine to cool it down and brought it to her. Jiang Pingji couldn't help but feel the bitterness on her tongue when she smelled the medicine, but she couldn't do anything about it. She could only pinch her nose and drink it in one breath. Cough cough. How much gold thread did the doctor put in? It's so bitter, Weisi said. There is no Chinese gold thread in the medicine. Jiang Pingji said, it's also very bitter. Even the root of the tongue is bitter. Try it if you don't believe me. She pointed at her lips, and Wei Ci could not help but turn his head away. Wei Ci was well aware that old concubine's taste was naturally not to taste the dregs. I'm sick, but you don't even treat me well. So, Jiang Pingji drooped her head and accused Wei Ci in a hoarse voice, trying to pass the matter over. Wei Ci sighed, and there was some helplessness in his tone. My lord, are you really sick? Jiang Pingji was speechless. Wei Ci said, you've forgotten that I've been with you for more than 20 years in your previous life. Whether you're really sick or pretending to be sick, outsiders don't know, doctors and medical officials don't know, but I, as the person who sleeps by your side, know. My lord, are you trying to rely on pretending to be sick to make me forget about yesterday's matter? Jiang Pingji could not help but pull the blanket higher to cover her head. She said gloomily, I'm not pretending to be sick to fool you, Wei Ci said. My lord, are you trying to say that you spread the rumor that you have a cold and used it to mislead the Nan family of Fen Prefecture? To lure the snake out of its hole? It was such a coincidence that the Nan family might misunderstand that Jiang Pingji was really dead or seriously injured. In order not to cause panic, they used illness as a cover. When Jiang Pingji returned last night, the sky was already dark, and there was basically no one along the way. Except for a few confidants, no one else knew that Jiang Pingji had become a hands-off boss yesterday. As long as the news was blocked in time, the possibility of the Nan family being deceived was very high. But Wei Ci dared to guarantee with his head that this was definitely not the main reason for her pretending to be sick. Others would think carefully before taking action, but she would think about how to make up for the loophole after taking action. She could even deceive everyone's judgment and create an image of being thoughtful and cunning. Her escape route was blocked by Wei Ci, so Jiang Pingji naturally had nothing to say. Wei Ci said, I'm not saying this to criticize you, my lord. I just hope that you know my attitude towards this matter. No, I should say my attitude towards similar incidents. Back then, His Majesty disregarded his own safety and repeatedly put himself in danger. Although it was also for the peace of the court and to eliminate thieves and trifles, the sacrifice was too great. In the end, when His Majesty had just reached the age of knowing destiny, he was like a dragon in heaven. Back then, I did not have the courage to stop and advise him. It is still a matter of regret to this day. In this life, since you have given me the courage, there are some words that cannot be kept in my heart. There is no harm in saying them out. Jiang Pingji was silent for a long time. She blinked her eyes and looked at him sincerely. I will change. Wei Ci's expression softened slightly. My lord does not need to make any guarantees to me. No one can restrain you except my lord. Jiang Pingji was speechless. If she had known that she would end up like this after acting recklessly, she would have thought more before doing anything. If I may be so bold as to say, you are my lord, our backbone, and the future ruler of the world. Your life and death is not only your own business, but also the fate of countless people in the world. Wei Ci said, on the battlefield, you are not required to be more capable than a general in charging and breaking through enemy lines, nor are you required to be more resourceful than a strategist. These things are just icing on the cake. If not, they are harmless. To us, the Lord's safety is a miraculous elixir that is more magical than any tranquilizer. Do you understand? Jiang Pingji thought of the old chief's words last night and naturally understood what he meant. Different positions, different roles, and different actions and words were also different. When she was a feudal lord, everyone could tolerate it. In the future, if she did not change when her status improved, sooner or later, there would be discord and discord. Jiang Pingji thought that she had changed a lot. She restrained herself and greatly reduced the frequency of her wandering on the battlefield. However, in the eyes of Wei Ci and the others, she still did not do enough. It was good to have a lord who was good at fighting, But how could her subordinates feel at ease if she casually fell into a dangerous situation because of her strong martial arts? No one in this world could hurt her, but what about the Federation? The marshal, the feudal lord, and the emperor were similar in some aspects. Wei Ci saw that she did not speak, so he softened his voice and said, "I am not being bold and presumptuous, nor am I overstepping my authority to restrain my lord." Jiang Pengji said, "I understand. I was not very mature in the past. It was my fault. You were just advising me bluntly." Chapter 1633. Jiang Pengji did not reflect on her actions. The Nan family of Fenzhou were like ants in a steamer basket. They were so anxious that their feet were burning. They had put in a lot of effort for this assassination. They had arranged everything properly to ensure that nothing went wrong. They could only succeed. That's what they said, but Lu Shi is very skilled in martial arts. I heard that he has the protection of a miracle. I don't know if those men of sacrifice can succeed. The head of the Nan family was very confident, but his brother did not think so. He had been anxious for a few days. From the time the plan was made to the day of the attack, his heart was always in the air. The ominous premonition grew stronger day by day. Even if Lu Shi has 3 heads and 6 arms, can she survive the ambush of more than 100 men of sacrifice? What protection of a miracle? It's just Lu Shi's lies to mislead the public. How can you believe such nonsense? Ridiculous. The head of the Nan family could not stand his brother's cowardice. He disliked his unlucky guesses even more. He had taken a great risk in planning to ambush Jiang Pengji. If he was not careful, he and his family would be smashed to pieces. Even if he did not show it on his face, there was an indescribable pressure in his heart. It was suffocating. His brother did not know how to share his burden. Instead, he was cheering for the enemy. "Elder brother, I didn't mean that." The elder brother, who was almost 50 years old, glared and asked sternly, "If you didn't mean that, then what did you mean?" The younger brother was speechless. He knew that his elder brother would not listen to him. He could only accompany him to wait for news. More than 100 men of sacrifice had been sent out. It was like an arrow on a bow. It was too late to say anything. For the hundreds of years of inheritance of the Nan family of Fenzhou, he could only pray for the success of the ambush. As long as Jiang Pengji died, the forces gathered by her would fall apart. The external threat would be easily solved. In this way, not only could the Nan family take revenge, but they could also take advantage of the chaos to rise. The hatred between Jiang Pengji and the aristocrats of Nanxing was not ordinary. First, there was the grudge of digging graves and disturbing the ancestors. Later, there was the hatred of confiscating family property and plundering tenant farmers. The loss of money was nothing. They could earn it back in the future. But the loss of face and status could not be forgiven. The Nan family of Fen Prefecture was also a prestigious family that had existed for hundreds of years. How could they tolerate a bunch of scum peeing on their heads? What Hejian Lu family? They were just a small family that couldn't be shown in public and didn't have much of a foundation. They really thought too highly of themselves and even dared to call themselves a landowning family. Ever since Jiang Pengji entered Nanxing, everything she did made the aristocrats of Nanxing detest her from the bottom of their hearts. How are these landowning households? They're clearly shameless bandits. Take the loss of the Nan family in Fen Prefecture as an example. Jiang Pengji not only sent people to dig up a large number of gold and silver artifacts buried with their ancestors in their graves, but also took away the wealth they had accumulated. She also used force to take away their tens of thousands of fertile fields. Even if the Nan clan had used all sorts of methods to seize these fertile lands from the hands of the common people. However, once the things were in their pockets, they belonged to them. If Jiang Pengji snatched them from their hands, she would be a bandit. It was easy to imagine what his future would be like if he were to make a living under the noses of such a feudal lord. Those who strike first gain the upper hand, and those who strike later suffer the calamity. The Nan family, whose fundamental interests were touched by Jiang Pengji, finally took the risk out of desperation. Reporting, "First master, second master, there's news." The Nan brothers anxiously waited for the news. They waited from dusk until the moon was in the middle of the sky. Finally, they received the secret report from the housekeeper. Lu Shi is dead? The housekeeper calmed his rapid breathing and said excitedly, Lu Shi caught a cold and is seriously ill. He won't see anyone. Cold? The master of the Nan family curled his lips into a cold smile. He caught a cold at this time. Is it true or is he trying to cover it up? He didn't fall sick earlier or later, but he fell sick after the men of sacrifice took action. Only a fool would believe that. Oh yes, has the men of sacrifice returned? He didn't let the pleasant surprise get to his head. Instead, he asked about the whereabouts of the men of sacrifice. If the men of sacrifice also said that Jiang Pingji was dead, then she was really dead. They haven't returned yet. The housekeeper suddenly lowered his voice and said, however, this matter is most likely successful. The master of the Nan family asked, what do you know? The housekeeper explained in detail in his ear and analyzed. According to the news, Yang Tao and his guards stayed outside for a long time before returning. They looked hurried and solemn. I think it's most likely that Lu Shi was careless and went out to hunt without anyone with him. He was ambushed by the men of sacrifice. The men of sacrifice in the manor are all elites, but Yang Tao and the others can't be underestimated. For safety reasons, it's normal that the men of sacrifice didn't report back immediately. The most powerful lord in the world was assassinated. The news would definitely shake the entire 9 prefectures and 4 seas. For the sake of his own life, Yang Tao couldn't let the ambushed men of sacrifice go. He would definitely search all over the mountains and plains. For the safety of the Nan family, the men of sacrifice had to shake off their pursuers. It would take a lot of time to go back and forth. This matter shouldn't be publicized. Send someone to inquire again. The next day, Jiang Pingji was still nowhere to be seen. It was as if the lord who skipped work for 6 to 10 hours a day had vanished into thin air. Not only had Jiang Pingji vanished into thin air, but the reactions of Yang Si and the other important officials were also very strange. It was as if a storm was brewing. Various details were laid out in front of him. The master of the Nan family completely believed that Jiang Pingji was dead. Now that Lu Shi is dead, what's the use of Yang Si and the others sealing off the news? The master of the Nanxing family sneered harshly. Lu Shi has no children. He's an old and widowed woman. Yang Si and the others want to support a new lord, but they don't have a candidate. There are hidden dangers within, and there's an Shui outside. He snorted coldly. He seemed to have guessed that Jiang Pingji's death couldn't be kept under wraps and that the forces under her would fall apart. The Nan family didn't pin their hopes on An Shui. Their previous cooperation proved that An Shui was also a fraud. It was better to rely on oneself than on others. Rather than placing heavy bets on an unreliable person, it was better to rise up on their own. The Nan family secretly contacted a few aristocratic families that were on good terms with them and plotted in secret. At the same time, they sent people to quietly spread the rumor that Jiang Pingji might have died. They used this to shake the morale of Yang Si and the others. Therefore, similar rumors quietly emerged in the tea houses and taverns. The water army didn't immediately say that Jiang Pingji was dead. Instead, they disguised themselves as passers-by and asked her where she had been recently. She hadn't been seen for so long. Could something have happened? The other water army took the opportunity to take over the topic and slowly set the pace. After 2 or 3 days of fermenting, the rumors began to take shape. Seeing this situation, Yang Si smiled and teased Wei Si. Zixiao has met his match. Wei Si said, there's no evidence. His methods are clumsy. Yang Si was speechless. He was indeed the chief coach of the water army, Wei Zixiao. His words were domineering. Are we just going to ignore it? Wei Si said, as long as my lord appears in front of people, such rumors will fall apart on their own. There's no need to pay attention to them. Yang Si rubbed his chin and said, the Nan family took action without any evidence. Aren't they afraid that it's a trap? A cornered beast will do something desperate. Wei Si said, whether it's a trap or not, the Nan family is determined to send people to ambush us. There's no room for negotiation. If it were Wei Si, He would also be afraid that a long delay would bring trouble. The Nan family's choice was very normal. It was right to leave the matter of rumors to Yang Si. Yang Si didn't care much about it. He was more curious about his lord's changes in the past 2 days. He suddenly asked, "Is there anything wrong with my lord?" "What's wrong?" Wei Si asked. Yang Si pointed to his head and said with a solemn expression, "Everything is wrong. It's as if she's a different person. My lord has been diligent in her administration these days. I wouldn't dare to do this even in my dreams." Zixiao, say, could it be that the lord has been possessed by some wild monster? Chapter 1634. Before Wei Tsong was imprisoned in the back mountain of the imperial mausoleum, he had once been a flirtatious youth. He could still remember those years when the mountain flowers were in full bloom. Young men and women chatted happily, drinking elegantly or chatting merrily. They were full of youthful spirit. The night wind rustled the curtains. Wei Tsong leaned against the side of the table and slept lightly. He gradually fell asleep. Today's dream was unusually colorful. Everything became clear. He looked at the contents of the dream and vaguely remembered that this was the Golden Scale Academy. His gaze fell on the waterside pavilion. Seeing a group of youths in blue and white uniforms chatting and laughing together, he could not help but smile. Wei Tsong remembered. So it was that day. Which day? Naturally, it was the day his mother broke the legs of the Minister of Works' son's son. Wei Tsong could not help but approach in an attempt to hear more clearly. At this moment, a familiar-looking youth said with a smile, "Do you think that the Minister of Works is Shi Yu's mother? She actually broke into the academy with such a thick stick and dragged her son out to break his legs. I was scared to death." The youth was also the son of a court official. He shared a table with Shi Yu, the son of the Minister of Works. When the Minister of Works rushed in and dragged his son out by the collar, he was scared out of his wits. "I don't know if she's his mother or not, but it's doubtful if Shi Yu is his son." The other youth opened his folding fan. His face was slightly round and immature, clearly the appearance of Wei Tsong when he was young. His brows were brimming with vitality, and there was no sign of the loneliness he had experienced after so many years. The Minister of Works is such a talented person, so why is his son so unworthy of cultivation? In my opinion, it's good enough that Shi Yu only had his legs broken by his mother. She didn't kill him out of consideration for their blood relationship. Shi Yu was the son of the Minister of Works, Bai Yuexia, and her husband, Shi Zhong. Because Shi Yu was the only male in the family, he was unruly spoiled by his father and grandmother. He acted arrogantly and often bullied the ordinary students of the academy. Wei Tsong was only the concubine's son of the Grand Tutor. He had naturally been bullied by Shi Yu and harbored resentment in his heart. The youths were curious. "Wei Tsong, do you know the inside story of Shi Yu being beaten?" Everyone was very surprised. The little tyrant Shi Yu's leg was actually broken by his own backer. This could be said to be the news of the year. The wooden stick that Minister of Works Bai Yuexia used to break her son's legs was as thick as a strong man's arm. Why was the little tyrant so arrogant and despotic? Wasn't it because he had a mother who was the Minister of Works? Shi Yu's father. The two of them had already separated 800 years ago. Shi Yu's father, Shi Zhong, was even more useless. Naturally, I know some inside information. Shi Yu deserves this. The youth said, Shi Yu has mediocre looks, mediocre talent, and mediocre looks. Logically speaking, he shouldn't be likable, but he has roots. Although the Minister of Works was there to correct and supervise him, it wasn't easy to be a strict mother. Shi Yu was instigated by his family to leave his biological mother. In the end, he made a big mistake. Even a barbecued pork is better than him. Young Wei Tsong continued. 2 days ago, an imperial censor reported to the Minister of Works, saying that she didn't teach her son well. She allowed her son to force women into prostitution, commit violence on the streets, and cripple people on horseback. The Minister of Works returned to his residence to investigate and confirmed that the matter was true. In a fit of rage, he beat his son with a rod. "How did you know this news?" Young Wei Tsong said, "Heavenly secrets cannot be revealed. There's always a way that I know." Seeing his dream self reveal the childish and gloating smile unique to youths, Wei Tsong's lips curled into a bitter smile. He clearly remembered that because of this matter, he had been punished by his father when he was young. His father heard that he was gossiping behind someone's back and criticized others. He said that this was not the conduct of a gentleman and punished him to copy books. The young Wei Tsong was in his rebellious period. His father's indiscriminate punishment made him very indignant. How was it that he wanted to make things difficult for Shiryu? It was clearly Shiryu, the little tyrant, who privately bullied and humiliated Wei Kong. How did he humiliate him? He cursed him to his face for being concubine Teng's son, saying that his status was lowly and that he didn't have the right to chat with a student from a good background. Not only did he humiliate his background and his mother, but he also humiliated his father's defeat in the imperial court several years ago. More than once, Wei Tsong was blocked in a remote corner of the academy by this little tyrant. He suffered these grievances, but he didn't dare complain to his father. Although Shiryu's words were unpleasant to hear, there was one thing he was right about. His father was only the grand tutor, and he was only concubine Teng's son. If his father sought justice from the Minister of Works for him, it would implicate his father's already bad official career. As the saying went, birds of a feather flocked together. The little tyrant, Shiryu, was a hedonistic son of rich parents, and his scoundrelly friends weren't good people either. Wei Tsong's background was lowly, but he was ranked among the best. He was often used as an example by his teacher to attack these slackers, imperceptibly attracting a lot of hatred. They knew that Wei Tsong was easy to bully and had no backing. They often joined forces to embarrass him, and verbal humiliation was considered light. There were a few times when they got into a conflict. Wei Tsong was alone and weak, and his opponents outnumbered him. He was punched a few times. The place where they fought was very hidden, and they were very careful, not leaving behind any evidence. Wei Tsong's heart was only filled with anger and hatred. Every time this happened, he couldn't help but resent his background, but there was nothing he could do. He could only swallow the bitter fruit. He didn't dare tell his father, afraid that he would make things difficult for him. Fortunately, he had a few peers he was on good terms with, and they became his only channel to confide in. These peers were none other than the sons of his father's elder brother, Wei Tsong's cousins. In terms of age, Wei Tsong was about the same as them. In terms of seniority, Wei Tsong was their uncle. Now that he thought about it, it was the care and persuasion of these good friends that slowly alienated the young Wei Tsong from his father. The young Wei Tsong coldly watched the scenes that flashed through his dream. The scenes that had once made him angry and resentful couldn't stir up any of his emotions at this moment. The young Wei Tsong saw his younger self being locked in a room copying books 20 times. He stubbornly refused to admit his wrongs to his father and stubbornly refused to stop writing. He copied from day to night before finally falling into a deep sleep. TSK, his temperament is quite like mine. Very stubborn. The young Wei Tsong's pupils constricted in shock. He saw the door being gently pushed open, as if afraid of disturbing the person inside. A tall woman stood outside the door. Time hadn't left many traces on her face, but her aura had become more restrained with the passage of time. This subject has failed to teach. The young Wei Tsong saw his father, whom he hadn't seen for many years, enter the room behind the woman in a green robe. His words seemed to be filled with emotion. Don't ask for forgiveness so easily. I've seen many people ask for forgiveness during the day. Are you going to do the same? The woman rebuked him, but her tone was very gentle. She bent down and picked up Wei Tsong, who was sprawled on the table, and gently placed him on the bed. She looked lovingly at the youth's eyes. At the end of the day, it's because I, as a mother, wasn't diligent enough. I didn't know that an academy student would commit such vile acts. Since your majesty has said so, shouldn't this subject apologize with death? The man's eyes were filled with apology and self-blame. He had raised Wei Tsong for so many years, but he hadn't realized that his child had suffered so much at Golden Scale Academy. If he hadn't found out by chance, he didn't know how long he would have been kept in the dark. He didn't know how to make up for it even if he wanted to. The woman said, "You and I are both at fault. It's not your Majesty's fault. Your Majesty has a myriad of affairs to attend to every day. Just government affairs take up 16 to 16 hours. How can you have the extra energy to keep an eye on your child's matters at the academy?" The man helped young Wei Tsong tuck into the blanket and said softly, "The matter with the Minister of Works? Her son has committed so many mistakes. It's already benevolent of her not to take that little beast's life." The woman sneered. "Is my son also someone that little beast can casually insult? If Bai Yuexia doesn't break his legs, I'll take my saber and chop off his head." Bai Yuexia raised her rod and broke her son's legs in public. On the surface, it was to punish and teach her son a lesson, but in reality, it was the woman's instigation. The imperial censor criticized Bai Yuexia for several days in a row, and the woman also had the intention of dealing with him severely. The intelligent Bai Yuexia naturally knew what to do. Was it more serious to have his legs broken by his mother or to have his head chopped off by the emperor in a fit of rage? Choose for yourself. Although Bai Yuexia didn't know of Wei Tsong's past, she had followed Her Majesty for many years and understood Her Majesty's intentions. She was serious. The man sighed softly and tucked Wei Tsong's scattered hair behind his ears with his fingers. The woman said, "Golden Scale Academy should also rest and reorganize. If something like this happens again, I'll cut off their parents as well." It was originally a place for students to study, but she didn't expect such a bullying scandal to appear in the Golden Scale Academy just a dozen years after it was established. Of all things, bullying Wei Kong. She simply didn't want to live. The woman said she wanted to reorganize the Golden Scale Academy, so she would definitely reorganize the entire academy. In that case, Ci and Fusho will find an opportunity to have a good talk and console him. The woman nodded. The young Wei Tsong watched everything in his dream. His eyes were sore and swollen, and 2 streams of hot tears rolled down his cheeks. So that was the case. When Wei Tsong was young, he was bullied by his classmate, the little bully. However, after the Minister of Works, Bai Yuexia, personally broke Shi Yu's legs, those bastards became obedient and no one came to provoke Wei Tsong again. At that time, Wei Tsong naively thought that Bai Yuexia's actions had a deterrent effect. So this was the truth. His mother was busy every day, yet she still took time out of her busy schedule to help him vent his anger. His father had also tried to talk to him and console him. However, the young Wei Tsong was willful and rebellious. He had long been instigated and bewitched by others, so he couldn't listen to his father's nagging and lecturing. If he could turn back time, he wouldn't have said those hurtful words to his sister, nor would he have been instigated to harm his parents. Vaguely, Wei Tsong heard a familiar call from the horizon. He struggled to open his eyes and found Ning Wanyue kneeling to the side, looking at him with concern. "Wanyue? What happened?" Wei Tsong heard his voice hoarse and his face was wet. Was Lang Jun a nightmare just now? Ning Wanyue used a handkerchief to wipe away the tears on his face. Wei Tsong lowered his head and leaned on her shoulder. The candlelight elongated the shadows of the 2 snuggling together. Chapter 1635. Jing Rong, do you have the guts to tell this to the Lord? Just because the Lord was diligent in governing, they suspected that she had been possessed by a wild spirit. Wasn't this indirectly saying that the Lord had been too lazy in the past? Even if Yang Si was telling the truth, the Lord did not like to hear it. If she really knew about it, Wei Ci was worried that the weeds on Yang Si's grave would be 3 feet tall. "I don't have the guts. I don't dare to do it. I was wrong." Yang Si quickly waved his hand. His desire to live had once again saved his life. Wei Ci said, "My lord has grown up. It's our good fortune." In his previous life, His Majesty had only started to work diligently after he had ascended to the throne. He was like a student who had wasted a whole summer vacation and was frantically rushing to finish his homework in the last few days. He had started to change early in this life, so he expected that his future situation would be much better than his previous life. At the very least, he would be able to avoid alienating his subjects to the greatest extent. Wei Ci's sentiments came from the bottom of his heart, but Yang Si could not help but ridicule his prehistoric power. Grown up? The age at which people of the same age are going to propose marriage for their children? Yang Si glanced at Wei Si with a strange look in his eyes and smiled awkwardly. Grow up? Lord is getting old at this age. Wei Si, there was no need for his lord to make a move. He wanted to send Yang Si to paradise now. Even though Jiang Pingji always said that she was a slacker in her studies and that her cultural courses were the lowest among all the commanders, it did not mean that she was the slacker in everyone's impression. Sabanin, Peking University is still alright, said that Peking University was still alright, so was Peking University really just still alright? To ordinary people, it was still an existence that they needed to look up to. Similarly, when Jiang Pingji said that she was a slacker, it was only in comparison to people of the same level. Once she started to correct herself, everyone would be able to experience the crushing power of their lord in all aspects. Yang Si and the others were happy for less than 2 days before they complained incessantly. Jiang Pingji could usually finish the government affairs that normally took 3 days. What should she do with the remaining time? Naturally, it was to bring forward the matters that would happen in the next 4 or 5 days. As Jiang Pingji's subordinates, Yang Si and the others had to keep up with the pace. The faster the pace, the more pressure they were under. At this moment, Yang Si, Feng Zhen, and the others missed the days when their lord was a hands-off boss. Since her lord was a hands-off boss, she didn't delay her work. Now that she was in her workaholic mode, she was practically going to F***ck someone to death. In the past, I indulged myself in pleasures and neglected government affairs. Fortunately, you did not abandon me and have been tolerant until now. From now on, I will not disappoint you. Jiang Pingji's words were a positive promise. Not only did she admit that she had been distracted by playfulness, but she also promised that she would change. As a lord, she calmly admitted her mistakes to her subjects. Just this magnanimity alone was admirable. Yang Tao's old officials, who had been biased against her before, now looked at her in a new light. Of course, some people were gratified, while others expressed doubts. They thought that Jiang Pingji's popularity only lasted for a short period of time. Who asked her previous image to be so deeply ingrained in people's hearts? Not only these people, but even some of the salted fish thought so. They never expected Jiang Pingji to be serious and do what she said. Qingfeng Wenshu, the originally calm and mischievous host, has suddenly become a leader. I'm not used to it. Aodi Leming, really? Why do I feel that the host still likes to smile so much? Which leader would be like her? Boss, I want a carrot. Who said that being serious in speech and manner is the style of a leader? Tudu Feichio, I feel that the current host is more in line with her identity. Hippie fooling around is indeed very close to the people, but it is not always good to be close to the people. There will always be people who think that being close to people with power is equivalent to having power. Not everyone is self-aware. The host is friendly to them, but they feel that the host is easy to bully and does not have the dignity that a ruler should have. Once the subjects feel that the ruler has lost his dignity, they will overstep and even trample on him. There is no such phenomenon now because the host is still a warlord in troubled times. She has a strong murderous aura. No matter how cheeky she is, it can't hide the fact that she has killed countless people. But in the future, when the world is stable and the people live and work in peace, there will always be people who are blind and only remember the host's closeness to the people. They will forget the host's ruthlessness and then do something that oversteps. Comfort will erode a person's vigilance and they will forget their previous caution. Diuluo, you're right, boss. Being close to people with power and mistakenly thinking that you have power is a deep-rooted bad habit of insatiable greed. This reminds me of the babysitter case that caused an uproar a few years ago. The employer gave the babysitter a high salary and let her eat at the same table with them. He gave her red packets on holidays and helped the babysitter's son find a job. The employer treated the babysitter so well that the babysitter felt that she was superior. She stole and abused the child. In the end, because of a conflict, she wanted to kill the employer. She brought people to rob and kill the employer. There are countless similar cases. On the whole, The idle people were mostly supportive. Jiang Pengji gathered her thoughts. She had the intention to hide it, so she did not appear in public for several days. She had been recuperating from illness. Only a few trusted subordinates could see her. There was no doubt about the loyalty of Yang Si and the others. The spies on the Nan family's side naturally could not find anything. When they did not receive any news from the kamikaze warriors, the Nan family was initially a little shaken. No matter how careful the kamikaze warriors were, once they succeeded, they would get rid of the pursuers and return as soon as possible. But there was no news at the moment. There must be something wrong when things are abnormal. When they heard that Jiang Pengji had been sick since that day of winter swimming, they were not sure. Their hearts were like wild grass straddling the wall, swaying left and right. The news of Jiang Pengji's death in an ambush among the people became more and more intense. Wei Ci, the chief instructor of the Navy, not only did not come forward to suppress it, but he also sent people to add fuel to the fire. Not only did it make the people believe it, but even some officials who did not often see Jiang Pengji were also shaken. Especially Yang Tao's former subordinates. A few people secretly tried to find out what Yang Tao had said. What did they want to find out? Of course, they wanted to find out if Yang Tao had taken the opportunity to rise again. As a feudal lord, how could he be willing to bow down to another person? Of course, because the news of Jiang Pengji's death in an ambush had not been confirmed. When these people tried to find out, they were very vague. It could not be used as evidence even if it was spread out. Yang Tao took into account their past friendship and sternly reprimanded those people, dispelling their thoughts. He knew very well whether Jiang Pengji was dead or not. The ambush of more than 100 kamikaze warriors could not hurt her at all. If they had any ulterior motives under her nose, they would not even know how they died. Wang Lin, the shrewd man, deliberately reminded Yang Tao not to reveal that Jiang Pengji was still alive, but he could not say that she was dead either. He had to be vague and ambiguous. Yang Tao suddenly understood, and his face looked awkward. Xiaoyang, are you worried that we have a mole among us? Wang Lin sighed. Whether the mole is one of us or not, we have to clear our name as soon as possible. Jiang Pengji was caught red-handed by the kamikaze warriors. Someone had to be a mole for the Nan family and pass the news to them. On the day of the incident, only Jiang Pengji, Yang Tao, and their guards were there. If Jiang Pengji's people were not bribed by the Nan family, then there was something wrong with Yang Tao. Chapter 1636. The Nan family chose this time to make a move on you because they want you to be their scapegoat. Regardless of whether the assassination is successful or not, you are the most suspicious person. If you want to clear your name, the only way is to help Lord Lu. You don't need to do anything, but you don't need to do anything wrong. Wang Lin asked Yang Tao to help Jiang Pengji cover up the lie to clear his partner's name. Besides, Jiang Pengji was also aware of their every move. She knew better than anyone else what those old officials with ulterior motives had said and done to Yang Tao. Wang Lin asked Yang Tao to do this because he wanted to prove his innocence. There were too many twists and turns. Yang Tao didn't need to understand. He just needed to do what he was told. Wang Lin would take care of the rest for him. Yang Tao secretly bid farewell to his former minister, worry written all over his face. He said, I don't know how many spies I have around me. Why do they have to come after me? Wang Lin said, people in troubled times have no choice. Xianxia doesn't want to get involved, but you can't avoid these things just because you don't want to. There would always be something that would force people, whether they were forced or willing, to walk on this thorny single-log bridge. It could be morality, ideals, protection, desire, power. Yang Tao did it to protect his family. What about Jiang Pengji? Even if there are thousands of people, I will go. Yang Tao was confused. What did you say? There are thousands of paths. Everyone has their own path, big or small, public or private. There is no such thing as high or low. You can follow your heart and do whatever you want. Thousands of paths lead to the same destination, Wang Lin said with a smile. I'm just curious. What was Lu Shi's original intention for walking on this path? Was it for the greater good or for love? No matter how I think about it, I only feel that this sentence seems to be the most suitable. Yang Tao blinked. He didn't understand. Yen Lin put his hand on his forehead and said, "To put it simply, Lord Lu is a man with great ambition and a big heart." Yang Tao smiled. It's rare to see Xiaoyang praise someone like that. What a high compliment. Yen Lin shook his head. Our paths are different. Yen Lin didn't want to risk his life just to watch this kind of person. He didn't want to go all out and join in the fun. Using a marathon as an example, Yang Tao divided the entire 40-kilometer race into 8 segments. He only had to run 5 kilometers each time, and Yen Lin could take his time. Contestant Jiang Pingji, on the other hand, wanted to finish 100 kilometers in one go. 40 kilometers was only her interim goal. Yen Lin admired her courage and ambition, but he didn't have the energy to finish the race with her. Yang Tao rested his chin on his hand. Xiaoyang, do you think I should confess to Lu Lanting and ask for her forgiveness? After all, they were old officials. Their relationship over the years was not fake. Yang Tao also did not want Jiang Pingji to settle scores with them. Yen Lin looked down. There's no need. Lord Lu won't do anything to them. At most, he'll scare them a little. Overall, it's more of a scare than a real danger. Between husband and wife, there were dozens of times throughout the year when the thought of separation would pop up. Their teeth and tongues would even fight, let alone between the monarch and the minister. He did not believe that Yang Si and the others had not thought of strangling their lord to death when Jiang Pingji repeatedly stood them up. However, it wasn't like they could put their thoughts into practice. They could just beat them up and educate them. There was no need to kill them all. Yang Tao let out an "oh" sound and felt relieved. Yen Lin said, "If it's possible." Yang Tao turned to look at him. "What? Don't leave your words unfinished." Yen Lin added, "Xingzi will try his best to confiscate the Nan family." Anyway, Jiang Pingji had borrowed Yang Tao's hands to confiscate many of the Nanxing aristocrats. She had offended them all. Digging up graves, robbing people's wealth. Jiang Pingji bore half of the blame, and Yang Tao bore the other half as the executor. There was no need to worry when there were too many lice. There was no harm in wiping out the Nan family. If the Nan family died in Yang Tao's hands, not only would they stand firm, but they would also be cleared of suspicion. Yang Tao let out an "oh" sound and did not think too much about it. He just smiled and squinted his eyes. I heard that the Nan family is rich. That's a fat sheep. It's a good job indeed. I wonder if I can get it. It was an unspoken rule in the industry to seize some of the loot during a war. Many generals had made their fortunes by doing this. Now that there was still a war to fight, it would not be easy to raise a family when the world was at peace. Of course, as long as you ask. As a former feudal lord, Yang Tao's identity was a shortcoming, but it had its advantages. For example, if he took the initiative to perform meritorious deeds, no one could compete with him. But, of course, it was to appease Yang Tao and satisfy his small requests without affecting the overall situation. Yang Tao rejected the temptation of the former officials. Without a backbone, they could only sigh and give up. They continued to observe. The Nan family could not sit still. They joined forces with a few aristocrats who had a grudge against Jiang Pingji to stir up trouble. Unfortunately, they died before they could succeed. Their conspiracy was only at the theoretical level when Yang Tao and his men discovered it. The letters and testimonies that they found were all preserved. The idle people were stunned by the operation. Jungwa lauda lauda. No. Shouldn't the streamer continue to pretend to be sick and dead? When the Nan family comes out with their troops, you will jump out and slap them in the face at the critical moment. They were only at the theoretical stage, and you already took action. It's not satisfying enough to slap them in the face. What was this like? It was like Jiang Pingji's eviscerating hand cut to a 5-minute trailer of an 81-episode political drama. Basically, the Nan family united the aristocrats. Just as they were about to go on stage, Jiang Pingji kicked them off the platform. The pace of this drama was as fast as the reincarnation of a hungry ghost. Even instant noodles lasted longer than it. One of the idle people asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Yewu Yenling, so, why did the streamer pretend to be sick and dead? To raid a few more houses, Jiang Pingji said. Didn't the Nan family unite 6 aristocrats in Fenzhou? They died a worthy death. Why did they have to wait for the fire to burn down the house before putting out the fire? It was better not to have this kind of hero reversal. Jiang Pingji watched the fire burn a few books with cold eyes. The smoke sounded the alarm and the small fire was put out. The small fire that the Nan family stirred up was the small fire that did not amount to anything. She sneered. Didn't the Nan family curse me for robbing their family property and digging up their ancestral graves as bandits? Heh, I spared their lives out of kindness and did not care about my own well-being. Then I will take the lives of their entire family. I will kill the chicken to warn the monkey so that the later generations will see the consequences. The Nan family was just a clown in her eyes. She did not take them seriously. It was just that they thought too highly of themselves. They jumped up and down and did not let others have peace. If she did not set a role model, did the people of Nanxing really think that she was a soft persimmon that could be trampled on at will? With the fall of the Nan family, the aristocrats of Nanxing should calm down a little. If they still did not calm down, Jiang Pingji could only set a trap for them and kill them until they all shut up. As for the spy, Chapter 1637. Everyone thought that the spy was on Yang Tao's side. Even Yang Tao himself was so worried. Unexpectedly, the final investigation revealed that Jiang Pingji had a problem. The spy bribed by the Nan family was not a trusted official. He was not even considered a mid-level official. He was just a small official who had no sense of existence but could grasp some of Jiang Pingji's whereabouts. Jiang Pingji did not know whether to be angry or glad when she heard the news. She was angry at this person's betrayal and deception. She was glad that the person who made a mistake was not the trusted official. When Wei Ci learned of this, he was really relieved. Although the emperor in the previous life was different from the lord in this life, the nature of the two was still the same. They hated betrayal the most. If a small character betrayed her, then so be it. The lord's anger was like a storm that would stop after a while. If the spy was a familiar face to the lord, then there would be no end to this matter. She would deal with it extremely ruthlessly. A typical example was Su Ku's rebellion in the previous life. After 2 or 3 years of allegiance, no one expected this rebellion. The impact was also quite far-reaching. When the emperor mentioned Su Ku in his later years, he still hated him and had the urge to dig his grave and flog his corpse. It was difficult for the emperor to raise troops in the previous life, but he did not suffer many losses. It could be counted on one hand. The one that left a deep impression was when Qiguan Rang assisted the old lord, Prince Changsho. When the emperor was at the front line, he led the troops and almost destroyed the emperor's nest. The other time was when Su Ku secretly instigated several middle-level generals to rebel. When the emperor was in a stalemate with the enemy, he used false information to trick the emperor into leading 500 soldiers into Jin Chichuan. There were still 7,000 soldiers lying in ambush in the Jin Chichuan Valley. Su Ku had planned for this for a long time. His plan was flawless. When everyone discovered the rebellion and led troops to reinforce the emperor, a day and a night had passed. TSK? If it weren't for Thief Lu's stupidity, courage, and arrogance, it wouldn't have taken you so long to realize that something was wrong. Su Ku's mockery was not unreasonable. The story of the wolf coming was often told. When the wolf really came, everyone could not believe it. Similarly, the emperor led the vanguard and frequently used the unconventional tactics. After a long time, everyone got used to it and their vigilance was greatly reduced. When she was plotted against by her trusted confidant and fell into danger, the civil and military officials in the tent did not react in time. Su Ku thought that His Majesty would definitely die. Even the people in the tent thought so. The military camp was preparing for the funeral. Unexpectedly, the people searching for His Majesty's body followed the bodies of the rebels and found His Majesty sitting in a daze in the middle of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Wei Ci had never seen that scene before, but he could imagine it from someone else's retelling. From the valley to her feet, the short distance of 1,000 feet was filled with countless broken limbs and remains. Blood gathered into a blood-red trickle. The pool of blood converged in one place, and the yellow mud on the ground could not absorb all of it in time. His Majesty, who had always been high-spirited, showed a rare look of disappointment. His eyes were red and bloodshot. "Su-ku betrayed us." Qiguan Rang replied in a low voice, "Yes. Death by 1,000 cuts." His Majesty took a deep breath and added expressionlessly, "I'll do it." Qiguan Rang asked her, "My lord, you don't need to bring Su-ku here for interrogation. Why did he betray us?" "Betrayal is betrayal. When he did this, he was already a dead man." His Majesty mocked in a hoarse voice, "I have no interest in his growth story. What kind of past did he have, what did he go through, and what did he do? Is this the reason why he betrayed me?" Qiguan Rang was silent. "Even if I don't interrogate him, I know why he did this. It was most likely for his old master." His Majesty sneered and said, "He was so loyal to his old master, so I fulfilled his wish. He was willing to plot for his old master for many years to assassinate me, so he was also willing to bear the punishment of death by 1,000 cuts for him, right?" Of course, in the end, Su-ku did not die by 1,000 cuts, but he was killed by His Majesty herself. His corpse was hung in Jinkichuan and could not be buried. The generals who accompanied Su-ku were not so lucky. They were almost all killed by His Majesty in one breath. His Majesty reprimanded whoever pleaded for them. During that time, everyone was in danger. Even if the counselors tried to persuade her with emotion and reason, telling her that killing so many generals at once would cause her to lose a lot of strength and ask her to think twice, they still did not have the determination to save His Majesty. His Majesty was determined to kill this group of rebels and traitors even if he was willing to suffer a great loss of strength. Wei Ci remembered that after the Jiang dynasty was founded, a few officials who were on good terms with Su-ku wanted to take advantage of His Majesty's good mood to ask for mercy so that Su-ku's corpse could be buried. In the end, those officials were reprimanded by His Majesty. They were all ordered to be suspended from their duties and go home to reflect on themselves for 2 months. Until Wei Ci drew his sword and committed suicide in his previous life, Su-ku's corpse was still hung in Jinkichuan. From this, it could be seen that His Majesty's attitude towards the betrayal of a trusted official was that he would bear a grudge for a lifetime. Therefore, Wei Ci was glad that the traitors this time were minor characters. The Nan family and the gentry clans that the Nan family secretly colluded with were all wiped out by Yang Tao and his troops. The traitors were publicly executed by 1,000 cuts. This shock lasted for more than half a month before it finally subsided. Obviously, not much time had passed, but everyone had the illusion that it was a lifetime ago. The gentry clans of Nanxing, Fenzhou, and Jiangzhou were even more cautious. They were dispirited and listless, not daring to jump around for a short period of time. This was because they realized that the superiority of the gentry clans did not work in front of Jiang Pingji, a bandit tyrant. Her capital to establish a foothold in this chaotic world was not controlled by the gentry clans. She did things unscrupulously, committing murder, arson, and looting with a clear conscience. She was a smelly, hard, and stubborn rock in the latrine. The gentry clans, as precious goose eggs, collided with her. The gains did not make up for the losses. They could not afford to provoke her, The chaos on Jiang Pingji's side had just calmed down, but a new storm was brewing in the other two places, affecting the situation of the entire world. One was Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen of Zhanjiang Pass. When these two black-hearted people got together, their black-bellied index was off the charts. They would plot against whoever they wanted. The other was Enchui's side. His beloved concubine, the Princess of Xichang, was diagnosed to be more than a month pregnant during the new year. The new year was coming. Enchui, who had been suffering from an unmentionable illness for many years, had successfully gotten his beloved concubine pregnant. This was double happiness. Enchui was ecstatic. In his joy, Enchui rewarded the 3 armies to celebrate. Everyone was happy and harmonious. However, Nie Qing of Zhongzhou was not in the mood to celebrate the new year. The gloomy atmosphere of the Nie family was a stark contrast to Enchui. Nie Qing had experienced the deaths of his father and father-in-law, as well as the betrayal of his cousin, Nye Yang. This allowed him to grow rapidly in a short year. Sadly, the speed of Nye Qing's growth could not keep up with the changes in the situation in Zhongzhou. Speaking of which, it made people sigh. Thinking back to when Nye Yang was still around, Nye Qing was the target of everyone's fawning. Chapter 1638. Outside, there were enemies eyeing covetously. Inside, there were hidden dangers. Everything was in chaos. The increasing pressure and the ever-present schemes caused Nye Qing to lose weight day by day. Not long after, he was so skinny that he was only left with bones. When all these heavy burdens fell on the young man's shoulders, his fine black hair turned white in just a few short months. Not only that, Nye Qing would often fall into a trance, his haggard appearance making people feel bitter. Who would have thought that this thin and frail young man in front of them was a high-spirited and carefree noble son of a landowning household 2 years ago? Anyone who saw Nye Qing's transformation couldn't help but sigh. However, no one would give up their ambitions just because they sympathized with Nye Qing. Even if Nye Qing had the intention to unite all the forces within Zhongzhou and form an alliance to resist Jiang Pingji's forces, would those who flaunt their seniority listen to Nye Qing? To them, the Nye family was like a starving camel that was still bigger than a horse. Nye Qing was still a stumbling block in their way and had to be removed. Even if someone was willing to temporarily stop fighting for the sake of the big picture, Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen were not just for show. How could they allow Nye Qing to reunite the scattered forces of Zhongzhou? As soon as Jiang Pingji led her troops to Zhangzhou, the two of them got together and formulated a series of plans against Zhongzhou. After picking and choosing, they finally decided to secretly support a puppet force. Although it was a puppet faction, it had a certain amount of connections and resources in Zhongzhou. It was a local faction that was born and bred in Zhongzhou. Back then, if it weren't for the fear of the Nye clan's despotic power and Nye Yang's methods, the leader of this force wouldn't have so easily submitted. TSK, you say that you're subservient, but you actually have the heart of a tiger. Qiguan Rang smiled as he read through all the information about this person. He said to Sun Wen curiously, "It's a pity that his heart is higher than the sky, but his life is thinner than paper. If he was so ambitious, why didn't Nye Yang deal with him before he died? If we leave such a disaster alive, even if we don't make use of him, he will become a huge problem for Nye Qing in the end." Sun Wen didn't even bother to bat an eyelid. Although Nye Yang is talented, he is not a god. Zheng Hao was ambitious, but he was also smart. So many ambitious hidden dangers had been eliminated by Nye Yang, allowing Zheng Hao to slip through the net. Either Zheng Hao's schemes are deeper than we expected, and he even deceived Nye Yang's calculations. Either this person's ambition doesn't match his ability, and Nye Yang doesn't take him seriously. Sun Wen wasn't too worried about Zhongzhou. After his lord's torment, Zhongzhou had already been beaten half to a pulp and had become a fish on the chopping block. Qiguan Rang smiled and said, "Zidao is right. Which category do you think Zheng Hao belongs to, Wenjing?" Qiguan Rang did not answer. The two old foxes looked at each other and smiled. Those who had been tricked by them did not know what would happen to them in the future. Feng Yi could barely understand what they were saying, but Sun Lan, who was not good at scheming, was still confused. Junior has a question. He was a studious student. If he didn't understand something, he would ask. Now, there were elders to guide him, learn more, and ask for guidance. When he could take charge of things by himself in the future, who else could he count on? Sun Wen asked, "What is it?" Sun Lan said, "Military advisor Qiguan said that Zheng Hao has the heart of a tiger and a wolf. He won't be willing to be a puppet. If we support him, will we really not be bitten?" It was too embarrassing to be reared and trained by a dog, and then be bitten by the dog in the end. Sun Wen smiled but did not speak. Qiguan Rang asked Feng Yi, "What do you think, Rongli?" Feng Yi said, "Military advisor's son also said that Nye Yang's calculations left Zheng Hao out. Junior thinks that Zheng Hao belongs to the latter. Ambition and ability don't match." Qiguan Rang asked again, "What's the reason?" Feng Yi said, "Although Nye Yang is Nye Qing's father, he spoils his son like he kills his own. If he helps Nietqin clean up even the small gravel before he dies, he won't be able to become a practice target for Nietqin to use magic stones on. This isn't really helping him, it's harming him. Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen didn't react. Feng Yi continued, moreover, since the two military advisors have chosen Zheng Hao, a junior boldly judges that Zheng Hao will not have the chance to grow into a dog that bites back. Therefore, Junior is not worried. If these words came from someone else's mouth, it would inevitably sound like flattery. However, Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen had watched Feng Yi grow up. They were well aware of her temperament. Qiguan Rang said, I originally thought that you and Feng Zi didn't really look like father and son, but now that I see it, there is one thing that you two share the same origin. Feng Yi asked, what is it? Qiguan Rang said, clever. Feng Yi didn't use a long explanation to reason and analyze. She only used the simplest information to deduce a conclusion. Although there was some element of opportunism, turning complicated things into simple things was also a kind of skill. This fellow Feng Yi has a bright future. Feng Yi smiled bashfully at the good-natured teasing of her uncles. Qiguan Rang and the others had finalized their plan. As a puppet being supported, Zheng Hao didn't think of himself as a puppet being controlled. His cooperation with Qiguan Rang and the others was mutually beneficial. Their positions were equal. Qiguan Rang and the others could plot against Zhongzhao through him. He could also obtain support through Qiguan Rang, accumulate resources, and then counterattack when he matured. Both sides had their own ulterior motives. To use an analogy, both sides were peacefully shaking hands and signing a contract on the surface, but behind the scenes, they were sharpening their knives. Qiguan Rang was waiting for the right time, while Zheng Hao was enduring hardships to gain courage. With the secret support of Qiguan Rang and the others, Zheng Hao gradually annexed a lot of territory and slowly gained confidence. He could even ignore Nietqing's dispatches and orders. Under Qiguan Rang's instructions, he even caused Nietqing a lot of trouble, sowing discord in the alliance plan proposed by Nietqing. Zheng Hao's advisor was a little worried about the current situation. General, Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen under Lu Shi's camp are both her confidants. She left the two of them at Zhanjiang Pass with ill intentions. Cooperating with them is tantamount to asking a tiger for its skin. We might as well reconsider this matter. Zheng Hao waved his hand to interrupt his advisor. He sighed heavily and said, do you think I don't know this? However, this is our only chance to get rid of the Nie family. It wasn't easy for Nie Liang to die, and now his son has climbed over my head. He's just a naive and incompetent brat. What ability does he have to order me around? I know Qiguan Rang has ill intentions, but I still have to try. The advisor was also aware of Zheng Hao's ambition, but he still felt uneasy. To Zhongzhao, Zheng Hao's actions were treason and treason. If the aristocrats of Zhongzhao found out, not only would they lose the hearts of the people, but they would also be reviled by their descendants for thousands of years. Was it worth paying the price of eternal infamy for a moment of ambition? Chapter 1639. Since Zheng Hao was so confident, the advisors who liked to flatter naturally boasted brainlessly. They had the same unfounded confidence as Zheng Hao. Or rather, they had never seen the combination of Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen. They did not have a concrete understanding of how scary these two people were. The advisors who were not willing to flatter naturally did not think highly of Zheng Hao's idea. Didn't Zheng Hao check his opponent's achievements before asking a tiger for its skin? Needless to say, Qiguan Rang did not have a strong presence, but if the things he had done were to be shown, it would be extremely frightening. What about Sun Wen? Sun Wen's presence was much stronger than Qiguan Rang's. Let's not talk about the unlucky people in the north borderline first. Let's talk about a more recent example. Jiang Pingji had caused Nie Liang's halberd to sink into the sand, and Sun Wen had contributed a lot. Which fool would treat Sun Wen as an ordinary old man when he schemed against the enemy without batting an eyelid? The combat power of these two people added together was not as simple as 1 + 1. However, no gambler was willing to listen to words that were not beneficial to them. Zheng Hao was that gambler, confident that he could bite off a large piece of meat from the hands of the banker who was cheating. Anyone with a discerning eye would know that Zheng Hao, the fat sheep, was about to be slaughtered by the banker, but the gamblers who placed their bets did not think so. Anyone who prevented them from placing their bets was an enemy who prevented them from getting rich overnight. Therefore, the suggestions of a few advisors who were rational were thrown to the back of Zheng Hao's mind. The advisors' suggestions did not cause much of a splash when they had more people against fewer people. When Zheng Hao tasted the sweetness of the bet, he cared even less about the advisors' honest words that were unpleasant to the ear. It's rare to see a brat like Nie Qing speak softly. Zheng Hao placed Nie Qing's letter upside down on the table. He stroked his beard and revealed a somewhat carefree and proud smile. When Nie Qing's father, Nie Liang, was still alive, Zheng Hao was always afraid that Nie Liang would settle accounts with him. For so many years, he lived with fear and trepidation. In order to curry favor with Nie Liang, he even used a roundabout foreign policy to curry favor with Nie Liang's relatives, such as Nie Qing. In terms of age, he was a full 10 years older than Nie Liang. In terms of seniority, he was one generation higher than Nie Liang, the same generation as Nie Liang's father and Nie Qing's grandfather. A few years ago, at Nie Qing's wedding, he had sent a large gift to Nie Qing, but he had received 2 replies. One was a normal thank you letter. The writing was very official, and it was obvious that someone else had copied it on his behalf. There was no sincerity in it at all. The other was Nie Qing's personal reply, but the contents made Zheng Hao so angry that his face turned ashen. In the letter, Nie Qing tactfully pointed out that Zheng Hao, as a county magistrate of a small place, should focus on the livelihood of the people and benefit the people. He should not plunder the wealth of the people to fill his own pockets. Following that, he converted the generous gifts that Zheng Hao had sent into silver and confiscated it. When Zheng Hao found out about Nie Qing's actions, he was instantly enraged and secretly cursed Nie Qing for being a hypocrite. Why was he scolding her like that? Nie Qing's father, Nie Liang, was a ruthless person who would even kill his own family. In order to develop his influence and fight for power in the Nie family, his hands were not clean at all. The things he did were much more ruthless and dark than Zheng Hao. As Nie Qing's father, since Nie Liang was such a righteous gentleman, righteous as the wind, shouldn't he be the first to slap his father in the face? In the end, Zheng Hao was ridiculed by the other party. Comparing Nie Liang and himself, and then looking at Nie Qing's hypocritical actions, Zheng Hao bore a grudge against Nie Qing. He had sent a generous gift, but had been scolded by the groom that the gift had not come from a proper source. Now that the tables had turned, Zheng Hao was elated. After his mockery, he picked up the flipped letter again and read each word carefully, as if savoring that wonderful taste. "General, will Nie Qing's side detect it?" Zheng Hao asked in response. "Detect what? So what if he does?" Without Nie Liang's protection, without Wei Yong's schemes, Nie Qing is just a puppy that has not been weaned. So what if he barks at people? Can he bite me to death when he's fierce? In other words, Zheng Hao did not think much of Nie Qing. The equipment that Nie Liang had left for Nie Qing before his death had been stripped clean by Jiang Pingji. What kind of storm could this fierce puppy do? The advisor said worriedly, "Nie Qing is not a threat, but if he reveals the fact that General is secretly conspiring with Lu Shi, there was also a chain of contempt between the gentry. Because Zhongzhou was once the strongest of the 5 countries, the gentry also had an inexplicable sense of superiority. Dongqing was in the middle and lower reaches of the chain of contempt. Their attitude towards Jiang Pingji was neutral and repulsive. In addition, Jiang Pingji had killed so many of Nie Liang's elites and generals. Most of those generals were inextricably linked to the gentry of Zhongzhou. New hatred and old hatred naturally made them even more disgusted. To put it lightly, Zheng Hao's actions were helping an outsider. To put it more seriously, Zheng Hao was a traitor who had committed treason and would be collectively targeted by the gentry of Zhongzhou. It was not that Zheng Hao had not considered it, but in the face of benefits, what was a crisis worth? Furthermore, don't worry. Nie Qing won't say anything because he has no evidence, Zheng Hao said confidently. This child that Nie Yang gave birth to really doesn't look like his son. Nie Qing does things by the book and is very dumb. Without solid evidence, he won't casually slander others. I have been very careful in my cooperation with the people from Dongqing and did not leave any traces. Even if Nie Qing wants to reprimand me, he can't. The advisor said, Nie Qing's temperament is indeed. It was not that Nie Qing was too naive, but his thinking was different from the feudal lords in troubled times. He was more of a gentleman. If Nie Qing had been born in the prosperous times, it would have been a matter of time before he became a famous scholar with the name of Righteousness and Righteousness. It could only be said that Nie Qing was born at the wrong time. He should not have been born in troubled times. The advisor suggested that Nie Qing strike first and gain the upper hand. He should take the lead and label the disrespectful Zheng Hao as a traitor. He could use the method of borrowing others' strength to make Zheng Hao a target and let others attack him. He could use this to curb Zheng Hao's momentum. Regardless of whether Zheng Hao had really committed treason or not, it would at least teach him a lesson and let him know how to restrain his arrogance. Nie Qing was indecisive. He had his own thoughts. It would be fine if Zheng Hao is not wrongly accused. If he is wrongly accused, it will inevitably affect the confidence of the alliance. Nie Qing sighed. Ever since the Battle of Zhanjiang Pass, everyone's expression has changed at the mention of Lu Shi and they have lost the confidence to resist. It was not easy to restore some morale. If we slander the alliance now for colluding with the enemy, I don't know what others will think. It will be hard to avoid panic, and the people's hearts that have gathered will scatter like a plate of loose sand. The advisor's thoughts were more radical. The focus of his thoughts was on how to suppress and curb Zheng Hao's momentum and arrogance. He did not think much about the possibility of slander. Nie Qing's focus was on the irreversible consequences of accidentally slandering Zheng Hao. Chapter 1640. The advisor was well aware of this and could only use the deceased Nie Yang and Wei Dan to force Nie Qing. Indeed, everything has its pros and cons. However, regardless of Zheng Hao's innocence, his rise will do us more harm than good. My lord, please reconsider. Nie Qing sighed in his heart. He really did not want to waste his strength in internal strife and benefit Qiguan Rang, who was eyeing him covetously. Thus, he repeatedly tolerated the feudal vassals who were pressuring him. Little did he know that his tolerance for the greater good, in the hearts of those ambitious people, would instead prove his incompetence and cowardice. Let me think about this matter for another night. I'll give you an answer tomorrow. Nie Qing sat in front of his father's token for an entire night and gave his official a reply the next day. What? Zheng Hao received the news one step ahead and was stunned. At the same time, he felt his face hurt. Half a month ago, he had confidently said that Nie Qing was incompetent and would not make things difficult for him without evidence. He did not expect to be slapped in the face half a month later. Not only was Nie Qing going to make a move, but he also planned to kill him so that there would be no evidence. To put it bluntly, he wanted to kill Zheng Hao, who had been jumping around recently, as a sacrifice to the heavens. Kill the chicken to warn the monkeys and establish his might. If Zheng Hao had not planted eyes and ears in the Nie family, he would not have received the news 2 days in advance. I really underestimated this little beast. He dares to bite me without any teeth. Zheng Hao cursed in his heart. He was very sure that Nie Qing did not have evidence against him, but he did not expect Nie Qing to change his character. Not only did he make a move without evidence, he actually planned to sneak up on him. Regardless of whether Zheng Hao was innocent or not, he would first behead him and randomly accuse him of a crime. One of the younger advisors could not sit still and said, "General, the only thing we can do now is to avoid the brunt of the attack." Zheng Hao scolded unhappily. "Is there something wrong with your brain? How do you have the face to give me advice with that brain of yours? Avoid the brunt of the attack? Nie Qing, this little beast, does not even intend to let me live. What's the use of avoiding the brunt of the attack now? The more we avoid it, the more it proves that we have a guilty conscience and become Nie Qing's burden. Nie Qing is heartless, so don't blame me for being unjust. Of course, it's an eye for an eye." Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen chose Zheng Hao because they knew that his temper was more unyielding. When he was underestimated, Zheng Hao knew to tuck his tail between his legs. Once he gained the upper hand, Zheng Hao's tail would start flying. Not only would he face people head-on, but he would also be headstrong. Qiguan Rang and his brother's original intention was to incite internal strife in Zhongzhou so that they could sit on the sidelines. The conflict between Zheng Hao and Ye Qing was the fuse of internal strife. The fuse had been lit, but whether or not the fire of this internal strife could burn so fiercely that it could destroy the entire foundation of Zhongzhou would depend on how Qiguan Rang and his companion would add fuel to the fire and drag more people into it. Zhangjiang Pass. Qiguan Rang could not help but smile when he received the news that Zheng Hao had made the first move. Zai Dao, you've won this round. Qiguan Rang's words had a double meaning. He was referring to both the game of Go in front of them and their predictions of Zheng Hao and Ye Qing. Qiguan Rang's guess was closer to the truth. Although Zheng Hao's momentum was fierce, he could not fight Ye Qing head-on. He could only choose to strike first to gain the upper hand. Taking advantage of the fact that Ye Qing had not sent the news of the purge to his subordinates, he led his troops to deceive Ye Qing's territory, Gaofeng City. He tricked the city guard into opening the city gates. Once the city gates were opened, the guard was killed when he was unprepared. Gaofeng City changed hands in less than half a day. By the time Ye Qing received the news, Zheng Hao had already won 2 cities. The crowd was in an uproar. Qiguan Rang's guess was not far from the truth. Sun Wen, on the other hand, was slightly off the mark. He had underestimated Zheng Hao's ambition and greed. I'm getting old. An old man's brain is getting duller and duller. I can't compete with young people. He spoke modestly, but there was no displeasure on his face. He happily took out a few golden melon seeds and gave them to Qiguan Rang. These two were not only playing Go to compete, they were also playing for stakes. Small bets were pleasing, but large bets were harmful. Using the game of Go as a bet had tainted elegant actions with the smell of dung. Which dung? They regarded money as dung. Qiguan Rang laughed. Zai Dao is old but strong. It's still too early to say such things. Sun Wen smiled faintly and didn't comment. After the game, the two cleaned up and planned to discuss another game around the stove. It was snowing heavily outside, but it was warm and cozy inside the room. Zheng Hao is a qualified chess piece, but the entire game can't be supported by one chess piece. Similarly, if Zhongzhou wants to become completely chaotic and waste its resources on internal strife, Zheng Hao alone won't be enough. Qiguan Rang held a glass cup of wolfberry tea and added a spoonful of thick honey to it. He lamented the corrupt life of the rich while enjoying himself. Ye Qing's personality isn't like his father's, but he's not the same. Isn't this a surprise? Zheng Hao can only be considered a whetstone in front of him. Wasn't that right? Niel Yang had counted everyone but left out Zheng Hao and the others. Wasn't he planning to use Zheng Hao and the others to sharpen Ye Qing? From this, it could be seen that in Niel Yang's calculations, Zheng Hao was no match for Ye Qing. The two old foxes gathered together to play Go and chat. With a few words, they had decided the future of Zhongzhou. How could they escalate the internal strife in Zhongzhou? Not only did they have to drag more people into the water, but they also had to ensure that Zhangjiang Pass wouldn't give them external pressure. Without external threats, the signs of internal strife had risen again. With a gentle breeze to help the fire, wouldn't this game of Go be set up? Sun Wen took the opportunity to throw out a bombshell and drag those who had been watching from the sidelines into the water. This bombshell had something to do with a certain neutral power in Zhongzhou. This power was originally attached to the Nye family. After Niel Yang's death, they took advantage of Ye Qing's unfavorable position to become independent. Sun Wen's bombshell became the fuse for this neutral power to go against the Nye family. The bombshell was about the good deeds done by a legitimate son of the Nye family during the Nye family's heyday. How do you know? Qiguan Rang was very curious about what other gossip Sun Wen had in his hands. No, a trump card. Every time he played it at the most critical moment, it would achieve unexpected results. Sun Wen said coldly, as a father, I naturally pay more attention to what the murderer of my son has done. the descendant of the Nie family who killed Sun Wen's only son, had dealings with many landowning women. Some had done so willingly, and some had done so unwillingly. His only son, Sun Lai, had won first place at the assembly. Although the descendant of the Nie family bore a grudge against him, it wasn't to the extent that the other party would break his legs out of humiliation and send him to the border on a groundless charge. Sun Lai had written an article at the assembly, and the content of the article had poked at the other party's sore spot. An article? Qiguan Rang had a respectful attitude and hadn't investigated the death of Sun Wen's only son. Thus, he didn't know exactly what had happened at the time. Hearing Sun Wen mention it, he asked a few more questions. What about the article? Sun Wen's mouth twitched. An article that used something to mock others, attacking the chaos in the landowning families. It hoped that the foppish sons who had a disgraceful style of conduct would sober up and reflect on themselves. They would respect themselves and not insult their families and bring shame to their ancestors. However, different people have different interpretations. The author may not have intended it, but the reader has. The descendant of the Nie family mistakenly thought that Lai had seen him having an affair in the backyard and used it to threaten him. That's why he wanted to kill him. Chapter 1641. Sun Lai's death was caused by many reasons, and not just one or two. First of all, the direct descendant of the Nie family was arrogant and domineering, and he could not tolerate others suppressing his limelight. However, Sun Lai's article not only suppressed his limelight, but also stabbed straight at his sore spot, causing him to mistakenly think that Sun Lai was threatening him with an illicit affair. Finally, there was also Nie Yang fanning the flames from the side, pushing his only 50% killing intent to 10%. Sun Wen's heart was filled with hatred. Even in his dreams, he wanted to kill the murderers involved one by one. He dug 3 feet into the ground and investigated the events of that year again and again to ensure that no fish escaped the net. The person who killed his only son must die. Even his grandson, Sun Lan, did not know that after so many years, Sun Wen had not walked out of the pain. Every time he woke up from a nightmare in the middle of the night, he could not help but silently read the information he had sorted out, word by word, as if he wanted to use it to engrave everyone in it into his bones. In order to make his revenge perfect, he made countless assumptions and plans. So, this person is also a pawn of Zaidao? Qiguan Rang was speechless. Fortunately, the old man's Sun Wen was an ally. If he was an enemy, he would have a headache. Who knew when Sun Wen began to scheme and set up a trap? He could even bring out a small, invisible person who had no sense of existence to make use of. He was really afraid of him. To be honest, this drive was similar to how his lord squeezed people to death. Sun Wen knew what Qiguan Rang was afraid of and could not help but laugh. The old man in front of you is just a mortal. He is no different from ordinary people in life, death, love, hate, and separation. He is not a god, and he will not be able to calculate everything. If Sun Wen was so powerful, his only son Sun Lai would not have died so tragically. These words came from the bottom of his heart. From Sun Wen's point of view, he just had more time and thought more than others. He tried to make up for the loopholes as much as possible, which seemed more comprehensive. Qiguan Rang laughed. Zaidao is being modest. Sun Wen said, "These years in Dongqing, I don't know much about the situation in Zhongzhou. I don't have any useful pawns on hand." In other words, he could only make full use of the limited pawns to achieve unlimited value. Only then would it not be a waste. Furthermore, it is the father's fault to raise and not to teach. The teaching materials of the Golden Scale Academy had profound meaning. Just 6 words were enough to express the responsibilities of a parent. That bastard raised a shameless slut who had an affair with another man before marriage. He even indirectly caused the death of my son. Of course I can blame this on him. Sun Wen's logic of venting his anger on others resonated deeply with Qiguan Rang. The two men's worldviews were particularly in tune. Qiguan Rang had taken Sun Wen, who was a generation older than him, as a confidant. Sun Wen was delighted. When the old man turned his head and saw his grandson's aggrieved face, he suddenly remembered the important matter at hand. His ultimate goal was not to become Qiguan Rang's friend, but to become his in-laws. It's okay, Lon Lon. Grandpa is quite satisfied with Qiguan Rang's look at you. He's so smart, there's no way he wouldn't understand hints. Sun Wen sounded a little guilty. Sun Lon asked, what if military counselor Qiguan pretends to be confused? Sun Wen, if that was the case, there was really nothing he could do. One family's daughter is sought after by many families. If you want to marry a good girl, how can you not suffer some setbacks? Sun Wen comforted his grandson and encouraged him at the same time. Doesn't the academy always teach that sincerity can open metal and stone? How can it be so easy to get the daughter of someone else? Sun Lan's eyes were filled with resentment. A good girl was hard to find, but hard to find also had different levels of difficulty. Obviously, Qiguan Rang's difficulty was hellish. Young people who were not smart enough should not hit a wall, or they might even lose their lives. Sun Wen sighed. No father-in-law in the world is easy to please. If Lon Lon was a girl, Grandpa wouldn't have handed her over so easily. Qiguan Rang didn't know about this? How could that be? Sun Wen got along with him exceptionally well. Apart from the fact that their worldviews matched, the other reason was that Sun Wen wanted to be on good terms with him. In terms of worldviews, Yang Si, Feng Zhen, and the others were also on the same level. Why didn't Sun Wen get along with them? Wasn't it because these people didn't have daughters of the right age at home, and Sun Wen's grandson had his eyes on his daughter? He was indeed pretending to be confused. His daughter wasn't even of marriageable age, and he had other plans for his daughter's future. Whether Sun Lon was a qualified husband still needed to be observed carefully. If Sun Lon wasn't suitable, Qiguan Rang wouldn't relent even at the risk of offending Sun Wen. They were all important officials under the Lord, and no one was inferior to the other. If the two of them really became enemies, Qiguan Rang might not be at a disadvantage. Of course, if Sun Lon was qualified, the two families would become in-laws. That would be a strong alliance, and there would be no harm in it. The two old foxes' calculations were making a lot of noise. The target of their calculations didn't feel comfortable at all. When Sun Wen bore a grudge against someone, he naturally wanted to kill him. The person that Sun Wen was staring at with his death stare was surnamed Zhou. His daughter had married into the aristocratic family, and after she reached marriageable age. Both the Yin family and the Zhou family were originally attached to the Nie family and relied on others. They were third-rate families with small clansmen. The ancestors of both families were of low birth, and they only had today's prosperity after several generations. They knew that development wasn't easy, and they cherished their feathers. What Sun Wen wanted to do was to tell the leaders of the two families that the aristocratic family's wife had affairs with the Nie family's direct descendants several times after marriage, and that the father of her son was unknown. At the same time, he would fan the flames and completely anger the two families' ambitions and hatred. Naturally, he would pull the Nie family's hatred. Originally, it was just the internal strife between Zheng Hao and Ye Qing. Halfway through, Zhou and An got involved, and the situation became even more chaotic. Zhou and An understood the Nie family very well. If they really rebelled and joined the war, Ye Qing would probably be badly battered. Which man in the world would tolerate the humiliation of being cuckolded? A rival in love used his family background to cheat on his wife, and even gave him a son of unknown bloodline. Who could tolerate that? Reality proved that he could really tolerate it. If the Nie family hadn't suffered a great loss, if Zheng Hao hadn't been there, this man could really tolerate being cuckolded and having a son of unknown bloodline in front of power and family interests. Many aristocratic families put interests first. Even if they knew that their wife had been cheated on, and that their son might not be their own, they could still pretend to be ignorant for the sake of interests. The problem was, did the current Nie family still have the power to intimidate others? Without such power, how could Lady N, who had been cuckolded, endure the humiliation of being cuckolded? When Sun Wen's information was sent to Mr. Cuckolded, he immediately went to settle the score with his wife. Chapter 1642. His actions were very abrupt and rude, waking up his sleeping son. His son was so frightened that he started crying. Mr. Green Hat was extremely impatient, and his eyebrows were full of displeasure. The lady was shocked. "What's wrong, Lang Jun? Why can't we talk things out? Why scare the child? All of you get out. I have something to say to Madam." Mr. Green Hat suppressed his anger and waved the servants away. After all the servants had left, he asked his wife directly whose son she had given birth to. The lady was a little guilty and confused. She said vaguely, "Why are you suddenly asking this? Could it be that someone is making irresponsible remarks in front of you? Lang Jun knows best who my son is. Why do you have to accuse me of being innocent?" Mr. Greenhair asked, "Before you got pregnant, did you have an ambiguous relationship with that animal from Madame Nye? Did you use the gathering as an excuse to have sex?" The noblewoman's expression changed drastically, and her exquisite makeup was almost ruined by the shock. "Lang Jun, where did you hear such slanderous words about me? It's fine if you don't believe me, but how can you doubt your beloved legitimate son just because of an outsider's words?" Mr. Greenhair sneered. "It doesn't matter if you don't admit it. You know best whether you did it or not. Maybe you don't even know whose son the child is? I didn't ask you who you had sex with before marriage, but you're still so restless after marrying into Madame N. How can you face me?" The more she spoke, the more ashamed she became. Whenever she thought of her legitimate wife being cheated on, the humiliation followed her like a shadow. Before the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women was popular in Zhongzhou, relationships between men and women were not conservative. The higher one's status and power, the more so. It was normal for widows with power to keep gigolos. It was normal for unmarried daughters to have 1 or 2 male confidants. The circle of the gentry was more open. However, after marriage, she would have to consider her husband's and her family's reputation and focus on taking care of her husband and children. This was the tacit understanding of the circle many years ago. Of course, after the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women came out, the men of Zhongzhou suddenly became more demanding of women. The unspoken rules that had been considered normal became intolerable. It was like this before marriage, let alone after marriage. Because of this, the husband and wife quarreled. They weren't hysterical, but other than not fighting, they basically didn't leave any face for each other. "Since you have so many complaints against me, why did you pretend to be deaf and mute before?" Mr. Cuckold pressed her further, and the lady was irritated. Instead of being angry, she laughed sarcastically. "You know very well why you are making a scene in my house. If the Nye family is still as dignified as before, even if I have a child with that person from the Nye family, and it's still unclear after marriage, would you dare to fart? You can't even fart." He was afraid that he would tacitly agree that his wife had served him well so that he could seize the opportunity to gain benefits. "I'll be frank with you. Even the pimps in the brothel have more guts than you. Ask yourself honestly, do you really not know the relationship between me and that person? Not even a whisper? What a joke. You probably know something, but you don't dare to delve into it in order to avoid it, right? Why are you pretending to be a man to settle the score with me? If you have the ability, why don't you bring people to kill that person? Let's go now." What kind of hero was he if he didn't have any ability and only knew how to yell at inner house girls? "Do you think I'm willing? If I tell you, would you dare to stand up for me because of your power? Coward." Mr. Cuckold's face turned ashen. "Why wouldn't I dare?" The lady said bitterly, "Of course you dare now. Is the Nye family still the Nye family of the past? If it was in the past, would you dare to speak up? Your whole family, old and young, are just the dogs of the Nye family. Today's Nye family is just an old worm with all its teeth pulled out, yet it still occupies the mountain and claims to be the king. You have long been unconvinced and have long planned to rebel and stand on your own. But because of your face, you are unwilling to bear the reputation of betraying the old master and being ruthless. Now that you're questioning me, you just want to use me as a raft to launch an attack on the Nye family. Say one more word?" Mr. Cuckold's most secretive ambition was mercilessly exposed by his wife, and he became angry out of shame. Even if you say 10 or 20 more words, I dare." The lady sneered and said fearlessly, With just you alone, even if you rebel against the Nye family, it's no different from hitting a stone with an egg. If you use this matter to get my father's help and use his guilt, your chances of success will be greater. As long as you still need my father, even if I say it for 10 days and 10 nights, don't say one more word. Do you dare to kill me to silence me? I'm asking if you dare. Mr. Cuckold choked on his wife's words. His red eyes surged with complex and vicious emotions. After a while, you don't dare. The lady sneered and raised her hand to straighten her clothes. She walked past him with her head held high and chest puffed out, leaving 2 words behind. Coward. The lady was right. Mr. Cuckold indeed needed his father-in-law's help. Now was not the time to fall out with the Yu family. When he succeeded, he wouldn't have to continue enduring that shrew's humiliation. Madame N and Madame Zhou quickly reached a tacit understanding. While Nye Qing was forcing Zheng Hao to jump up and down, they quickly acted and interrupted the rhythm of the internal fight. Madame N and Madame Zhou were originally attached to the Nye family. The Nye family didn't have their guards up against them, and even gave them a certain amount of trust. No one expected that the former dogs would suddenly bite back. Zheng Hao was the most surprised that Madame N and Madame Zhou joined the civil war. Even though he had acted first and tricked Nye Qing into taking 2 cities, Nye Qing had reacted and taken an effective counterattack. Zheng Hao's foundation was still weak. Even with Qiguan Rang and the others secretly supporting him, he couldn't compete with Nye Qing. He was almost beaten to a pulp. Madame N and Madame Zhou joined the internal fight. Nye Qing's backyard was on fire. Zheng Hao's pressure on the front lines decreased. Not only did he catch his breath, but he also forced Nye Qing, who was at his peak, into a difficult situation. Qiguan Rang and the others surrounded the fire to watch the show. They were in a particularly good mood. They planned to add bricks and tiles to the fire that had been ignited with great difficulty. Nye Qing and the others keenly sensed that something was wrong. They didn't want to be dragged into the swamp of the internal fight. However, Zheng Hao's greed and Madame N and Madame Zhou's ambitions wouldn't give up so easily. The more Nye Qing considered the bigger picture, the more fearless they became. In the end, they really fought. Nye Qing understood that according to this rhythm, they would either die from the internal fight between the 3 families or Jiang Pingji would take advantage of them. After thinking about it, Nye Qing chose the latter. Jiang Pingji was an external threat. Zheng Hao, Madame Zhou, and Madame N were internal threats. Nye Qing didn't think he had done anything wrong to them. However, they betrayed the Nye family at their most difficult time and made a counterattack. If he didn't kill these ungrateful people, was he supposed to keep them alive for the new year? Nye Qing didn't want to see his father in the underworld one day and be reprimanded by him for not being able to control his henchmen. Nye Qing was serious. The internal fight became even more intense. Apart from a truce on New Year's Day, there was no end to the fighting. At first, only a few families participated in the war. Later, other forces were involved. The situation was chaotic. Looking at Zhongzhou, Nanxing, and Dongqing, only Jiangpingji and Anshui were celebrating. Chapter 1643. Jiangpingji had been in the north for more than a decade. She celebrated the new year according to the customs of the north. This was the first time she had returned to the south. The new year in the south was very different, not only in terms of customs, but also in the environment. The snow in the north had always been thick, but it was not too cold around the new year. It was different in the south. The snow was not thick, but the air was chilly. It was during the war, so the atmosphere was not strong. The streets and alleys were almost empty. Half a month before the new year, Jiang Pingji led people to visit everywhere secretly. She was only relieved when she was sure that the people had been properly settled down. There were many people in the world who obeyed on the surface but disobeyed on the inside. That was why there were scandals of poor supervision and poor implementation. It was not possible even in the future interstellar with the information explosion, let alone in ancient times when communication was extremely inconvenient. The people under her command did not take the people seriously, nor did they take her orders seriously. It was normal for the winter clothes and food to be embezzled and embezzled. Therefore, Jiang Pingji's hands were stained with blood during this trip. She killed along the way, so the local officials spent the new year in fear. They were afraid that Jiang Pingji was secretly watching them. Who knew where she came from? Those who committed lesser crimes were reprimanded from top to bottom. None of the people involved could escape. Those who committed more serious crimes and embezzled more than the standard set by Jiang Pingji were merciful. Of course, it was not that she did not promote people along the way. Corrupt people were hateful and deserved to be killed, but those who did their duty well and even exceeded their quota should be rewarded and encouraged. She recorded the people and things she saw along the way in her mind's account book. Some people should be promoted. It was a waste of talent to stay in their original positions. Some people did not have enough experience. They needed to be honed for a year or two before being promoted. Some people were not as good as the top but were better than the bottom. Rewards were enough. The snow outside is melting. Why is my lord dressed so lightly? Wei Ci did not follow Jiang Pingji everywhere. He stayed to deal with the trifles of the new year. Even if he wanted to follow, Jiang Pingji would not allow it. After all, Wei Ci did not have a strong body like hers. If he ran around for a month in the cold season, he would definitely fall ill. I'm not afraid of the cold. Jiang Pingji untied the rope of her straw cape with one hand and threw the name list on the bamboo slip to Wei Ci. The paper was light, but it had its drawbacks. If it got soaked in the rain, the ink would scatter. For convenience, Jiang Pingji used a bamboo slip to record and a penknife to carve. Even if the bamboo slip was damp, the words on it could still be preserved for a long time. It was enough for her to bring it back for Wei Ci and the rest to copy. Wei Ci opened the bamboo slip. The first dozen or so names were all killed by the Lord, and each name was followed by the crime of being killed. The 20 or so names in the middle were reprimanded or demoted, and the last 10 or so names were praised or promoted. Remember the people behind you for this year's new year. Yes, sir. The files of those who were punished or killed are still on the way. It's a long journey, so it'll probably take 2 days to get there. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, in order to come back as soon as possible to spend the new year with you, I've shortened the journey time again. Do you feel touched? Wei Ci sighed. I want to be touched, but there are too many things to do this year. I have the heart but not the strength. Every new year, important officials would receive generous rewards. It was a kind of year-end bonus. Officials who had worked hard and performed well in the previous year would also receive it. Other than the important officials, who were personally reviewed by Jiang Pingji, the rest were arranged by her subordinates. In the past, Dongqing, which was a fraction of the later, had a small territory and few officials. It was naturally relaxed during the new year. Now that it controlled Dongqing, the northern borderline, and Nanxing, it had expanded in scale. The New Year's gifts had to be prepared long in advance and sent to various places. In her previous life, Her Majesty did not start this habit until she ascended the throne. From her ascension to the throne until the year of Long Yubin, it had lasted for a whole 18 years. No matter how fierce the battle in the court was, the lower levels of officialdom were still relatively clean. Now it had started early. There was Wei Ci's admonition and the enlightenment of the idle people. Even if it was an insignificant year-end bonus, the person who received the reward would be greatly encouraged. At the same time, it could also be used as a warning to those who did not receive the gifts. The types of gifts were relatively simple, such as a set of ink, a knife of paper, a piece of cloth. It didn't matter if there were too many or too few gifts, or if the gifts were too light or too heavy. What mattered was the meaning behind the gifts. This was not only to win over the hearts of the people, but it was also a warning to the many supervising officials. It was to make them constantly alert and not slack off. Especially when they knew that Jiang Pingji would spend a month at the end of the year inspecting the grassroots, they did not dare to be careless. To be able to receive a gift meant that they had done well in the previous year. This killer was very satisfied and they did not have to worry about losing their lives during the new year. As for those who did not receive it, they were naturally trembling with fear, afraid that disaster would befall them one day. After so many years, except for Nanxing and Nanxing who did not know the rules, Everyone in Dongqing understood her temperament. Towards those who were derelict in their duties and corruption, she would kill them without batting an eyelid. As long as they were dutiful and diligent in their duties, she was also a magnanimous and benevolent ruler. Every new year, the people would be surprised to find that these parents and officials became extraordinarily hardworking. Their performance in government affairs rose steadily and their efficiency was extremely high. For example, among the New Year's letters sent this year, there was a very interesting content. A small county magistrate who was mediocre but had been in a remote and desolate village for 23 years complained that his old mother was getting on in years. She happened to hear about foreign Chang peaches and really wanted to eat them. Even if she could not eat them, it would be good to see them. He also wanted to buy half a caddy for his old mother, but the small county in the 81st level didn't have it and the price of buying it on behalf of others was too expensive. Jiang Pingji felt that this request was not too much. This minor official's performance in the previous year was not bad and he had a good reputation in the local area. Therefore, the New Year's gift was changed from a knife of paper and 2 ingots of ink to a caddy of peeled Chang peaches. Not to mention how frightened and surprised the minor official would be when he received the Chang peaches, Jiang Pingji was busy until the morning of New Year's Eve before she stopped writing. There were wars everywhere this year. During the winter, she even allocated funds to save millions of people in Jinan and Nanxing. If it was not for the fact that the Nan family had assassinated 7 noble families in Finzhou and enriched their private coffers, her wallet would have been empty. The New Year's banquet was not as elaborate and grand as the previous years. It was more like an ordinary family banquet. Everyone gathered for a meal and summarized their performance in the previous year. Compared to her low-key side, Chui on the other side was very arrogant. Hua Yuan could hear Chui's laughter from afar. He adjusted the expression on his face and revealed just the right amount of puzzlement. He smiled and entered the main tent. I wonder what happy event has made my lord so happy? The bashful Xichang princess was kneeling next to Chui. His large palm held the princess's soft hand and he kept rubbing it with emotion. The heavens have not ended my heir. Chui's eyes reddened as he spoke. Although he said that the princess of Xichang was just a plaything and did not have the right to give birth to a young master for him, he was still very happy that she was really pregnant. Chapter 1644. Congratulations, my lord. Congratulations, my lord. Hua Yuan bowed with his hands folded. His sincere expression darkened the Xichang imperial concubine's eyes. She grew even more wary. She subconsciously rubbed her flat belly and couldn't help but sigh. She was both happy and sad. She was happy that she was pregnant. Her treatment would be several levels higher. No matter how much Chui looked down on her, he would not mistreat the child in her belly. She was sad that she was the imperial concubine of a nation. The first half of her life had been doted on by her father and mother. She had enjoyed all the riches in the world. But in the second half of her life, her country had fallen. She was homeless and had even been treated as a slave by a small feudal lord. She had no control over her children. She had once despised the women in the harem who used their beauty to please men. She had never thought she would be worse than them. The Xichang imperial concubine was not old, but she was very shrewd. Even though she was filled with sorrow, she still wore a gentle and elegant smile on her face. She knelt behind Chui. Those who did not know would think she was Chui's legal wife. Hua Yuan's congratulations were very ordinary, but Chui beamed. He valued Hua Yuan even more now. I should be the one thanking you. That divine doctor is skilled and virtuous. He is truly a divine physician. Chui couldn't help but grab Hua Yuan's hand. He patted it as he sighed. Perhaps because he had resolved a matter, he looked radiant. He seemed several years younger. Hua Qing, you have to thank that divine doctor for me. When Lin is born, he will reward you greatly. If not for Hua Yuan's recommendation, Chui would not have been able to cure his illness and have his own child. In terms of merit, the Xichang imperial concubine who had given birth was only second. Hua Yuan was without a doubt the first. Yes. Only the heavens knew what kind of willpower Hua Yuan had to deal with in Chui without batting an eyelid. He wanted to tell the unlucky in Chui that he could not give him the merit. After all, it was the Xichang prince who had worked hard. After Hua Yuan left, in Chui reminded the Xichang imperial concubine again. The child is still young. You have to take care of yourself. When Lin is born, you will not be treated unfairly. The imperial concubine felt very disgusted, but she had to show a shy and happy smile. I understand. I will definitely give birth to a healthy child for you. And Chui was very satisfied. He planned to spread this news so that everyone would feel happy as well. The news of Xichang's princess concubine's pregnancy quickly spread. The officials all congratulated her, and she was so happy that she could only see her teeth but not her eyes. This new year was the most comfortable new year since the disaster of the southern barbarians. Apart from a select few, the other officials did not know that Chui had an unmentionable illness. Those in the know included the old officials who had fought alongside Chui in the early years, such as the target brothers he had sworn to when he was a member of the Red Lotus group in Dongqing. Speaking of these two sworn brothers, he sighed. And Chui had been able to call them brothers when he was down and out. Later on, when he returned to Nanxing and started his own business, the aristocratic ways in his bones had completely separated him from his two sworn brothers. The two sworn brothers had martial prowess and were not afraid of death. In the early years, when Chui had no men and no land, they were indeed the trump cards that Chui could bring out. The present was different from the past. Was Chui still the stray dog of the past? He was now the vassal of Nanxing and Chui. The two sworn brothers were born in the wilderness and were illiterate. They spoke rudely and acted rashly. And Chui, on the other hand, was a famous aristocrat who had enjoyed all the glory, splendor, and wealth. The three of them did not grow up in the same environment at all. They did not share the same view of the world. However, Chui did not want others to say that he was an ingrate who shared hardships but did not share hardships. Even though the two sworn brothers had fallen behind for many years, he did not abandon them. Instead, he gave them a place to retire and allowed them to live a life where they did not have to worry about food and water, and Chui felt that he had done his best, but the two sworn brothers did not feel good about it. They thought that they were very important, but as Chui climbed to a high position, or as he recovered the glory that he once had, they seemed out of place. They had been marginalized by Chui all these years. One of them had even been demoted again and again because he did not do a good job in supervising the rations. Now, he was just a bald general. Calling him a general was just a nice way to put it. In reality, he was not even as good as an ordinary centurion. And Chui was overjoyed. They only had the right to be in the background because of their past hardships. When the crowd of congratulatory people had left, the two sworn brothers finally had a chance to say a few words to Chui. One of them was more straightforward. With a hesitant expression, he said, "Big brother, isn't your body? Why does sister-in-law have?" Before he could finish, Chui's face turned completely black. The other sworn brother interrupted him with an awkward smile. "Congratulations, big brother. When sister-in-law is pregnant, I will congratulate big brother again. I suddenly remembered that I still have things to do in the camp. I will take my leave first." With that, he dragged his sworn brother away without a word. If he did not leave, did he want to be killed by Chui in a rage? Did he not see that Chui's face was so black that it was almost green? Men could not stand the humiliation of being cuckolded, much less being questioned by a sworn brother. "My good brother, why are you dragging me away? If I don't drag you away, do you want to drag me to death? How did I drag you down? Big brother obviously cured his body and that's why sister-in-law is pregnant. Yet you're questioning whether his hidden illness has been cured. Aren't you suspecting that the baby in sister-in-law's womb belongs to another man?" He was almost at his wit's end. After so many years, did he still not know how to be more cautious? As they followed Chui, they became more aware of what it meant to be powerless. It wasn't that they were not brave enough when it came to killing their enemies. It was just that brute strength did not allow one to climb higher in this world. To make an analogy, when Chui had just started his business, Of course, he prioritized profits. He rushed for sales and income. It was fine for his subordinates to be a group of undergraduates. But when his business expanded and he wanted to expand his business, it was inevitable that he would choose to transform and pay more attention to product quality and the capabilities of the company's personnel. The two sworn brothers were undergraduates. If they wanted to keep up with the pace and not be eliminated, they had to work hard to enrich themselves. They had to work hard to make their abilities catch up with the elites from prestigious universities. Otherwise, what awaited them was elimination. Speaking of which, Dian Yen, who worked under Jiang Pingji, was a typical example. He was a hardworking person who kept learning and kept up with the pace. Dian Yen was lucky. Jiang Pingji, the Lord, gave him directions at the right time. Yang Si, the think tank, was stationed with him in Hu County for 2 to 3 years and gave him special lessons from time to time. Dian Yen learned with difficulty at first, but he also climbed up after much hardship. On the other hand, the two of them were not so lucky. And Chui did not have the patience. He did not think that their hard work would be very effective. His other colleagues also looked down on their background and abilities. They were unwilling to pay attention to these two uncouth people, let alone give them pointers. They could still stay in the Enchui group as a customer service and janitor. They could earn a living because of Enchui's kindness. Chapter 1645. Actually, for the two of them, being a customer service, security guard, or janitor was nothing. No matter what, it was better than squatting in a village and showing off their strength to survive. However, it was difficult to balance it out. And Chui used to be attentive and concerned to them, calling them brothers and thinking highly of them. But now, he didn't need them anymore. From being in Chui's right and left arms and confidants, they were reduced to the background, idlers who did chores. This wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that the people who used to suck up to them were now stepping on them. Their days were getting more and more depressing. With such a huge difference, it would be strange if they felt good. But they couldn't complain, lest Enchui heard about it. They only had a little bit of friendship left with Enchui. If they lost even this, they would probably be beaten back to their original state. So, let's not talk about these unhappy things. We haven't had a drink together in a long time. He patted the shoulder of his brother and sighed. Sister-in-law warmed the food and wine at home. We're going to drink to our heart's content tonight. Let's go. Both of them were sad people, so they agreed to get drunk together. Unexpectedly, they ran into Lu Zheng, who had lost a lot of weight and was about to return home. The brothers' eyes brightened. One of them called out to Lu Zheng. Military advisor Lu, where are you going? Lu Zheng's situation wasn't much better than the two brothers. The latter saw it and remembered it. Lu Zheng had sacrificed a lot for Enchui. The first 2 years were even more difficult. Who knew how much energy and effort it took to slowly open Enchui's shop, allowing him to enjoy the glory he had today. Now that Hua Yuan, who was more to Enchui's liking, had appeared, Lu Zheng, the strategist with whom he didn't share the same values, was slowly buried and marginalized. To be honest, Lu Zheng was one of the few people in Enchui's camp who was willing to look the two brothers in the eye. Thus, they were extremely respectful to Lu Zheng. They would greet him and say a few words when they met on the road. Lu Zheng turned his head and said calmly, "So it's you two generals. I went to congratulate my lord earlier. I'm on my way home to stay up for the new year." Even though there weren't many people in Lu Zheng's house, staying up for the new year was an old tradition. The two brothers looked at each other, cupped their fists and invited, "We are also alone outside, and it's boring to stay up all year round. Why don't you join us, military advisor?" Lu Zheng nodded in agreement. Festivals like the Chinese New Year should have some popularity, and the more people, the merrier. The two brothers happily led the way. After a few turns, they arrived home. The house was brightly lit, and a beautiful woman had been waiting outside for a long time. "Madam, go and prepare some good wine and dishes. We must drink to our heart's content with the military counselor and the others tonight." The woman nodded and led the two maids to bring out the wine and delicacies that had been kept warm. After eating 2 mouthfuls of food, her sworn brother said, "Sister-in-law's cooking is amazing. I haven't had such delicious food in a long time." The 2 brothers boasted about their business. Lu Jing sat at the side and listened quietly. He did not speak for a long time. He had met that madam once. It was said that she was originally the wife of a small aristocratic family. Because of the chaos of the war, she was separated from her family when they migrated. She fell into the hands of the southern barbarians and was tied to the back of a horse as a spoil of war. Whether it was luck or misfortune, the southern barbarians were about to take their spoils of war away to enjoy when they ran into the troops of Enchui's tent. At that time, Enchui's career had just started. The 2 sworn brothers were the most useful generals under his tent. The sworn brother killed the southern barbarian bandits and saved this concubine's daughter. He immediately saw her and brought her back to his tent without a word. From Lu Zheng's point of view, this kind of forced buying and selling was essentially no different from the southern barbarian bandits. Weren't they all bandits? But this madam had accepted her fate, so Lu Zheng could not say anything. He did not like this world. Whether it was men or women, they were all pitiful and weak in the face of evil bandits who took things by force. In the end, they had to accept their fate and treat the other party as heaven and earth. It was truly laughable. Lu Zheng was not a talkative person, so the 2 brothers did not think there was anything wrong with him. After 3 rounds of wine, their faces were red, and they began to speak with a lisp. Their voices sounded slurred, and they did not control their mouths. Lu Zheng listened and sighed inwardly. No wonder Enchui was at odds with these 2 brothers. Secrets could not be kept. Once they drank, they dared to say anything. As time went on, a narrow-minded person like Enchui would naturally have disagreements. The 2 were discussing Enchui's inability to have children due to her unmentionable illness, each saying something about how the other had gotten pregnant. Not only did Enchui disagree with them, but Lu Jing also felt uncomfortable listening to them. If the salted fishes were here, they would know why. Because the words of these 2 brothers were stabbing straight at the G-spot of a straight man. It would be strange if Lu Zheng, who had normal values, could feel comfortable listening to them. After listening for a while, Lu Zheng used the excuse of sobering up to go out to the veranda to look at the snow. The sounds in the room faded away behind him. "It's snowing." The bright moon poured down cold light, dispersing the tipsiness on Lu Zheng's body. His swollen mind calmed down again. He had a question in his heart. This question was the same as the 2 people in the room. How did Enchui have a child? How did the child come so coincidentally? Seeing Enchui so happy all day, it did not seem fake. Although he was confused, he did not say it out loud like a boor. Lu Zheng still cherished his life. If he angered Enchui's murderous intent because of this, wouldn't he die an unjust death? No matter how imaginative he was, he did not expect Hua Yuan to play such a trick. On the surface, he was plotting for Enchui, but behind his back, he wanted to kill Enchui. Moreover, he did not expect Hua Yuan to arrange for the sewing opportunity to be the elder brother of the Xichang princess. Those with more upright thoughts would not immediately think of something that went against human relations, unless it was someone as observant as Jiang Pingji or someone as schizophrenic as Hua Yuan. As he thought about it, Lu Zheng heard the crunching sound of wooden clogs stepping on the snow. A delicate fragrance wafted into his nose. A gentle female voice carried a watery warmth. The lady walked over gracefully and put down a cup of soup to sober up. Lu Zheng declined politely. "I haven't had much to drink, so I won't trouble you." He was not a single person. He could understand women's hints. When dealing with married women, it was right to keep a respectful distance. "Sir, don't be nervous. Lang Jun and 3rd brother are drinking in the room. The 2 of them are drunk and don't know what's going on here." The lady laughed. Seeing that Lu Zheng was still keeping a respectful distance, she said warmly, "Sir, please don't misunderstand me." The lady secretly looked around the room. Suddenly, she poured the warm soup on Lu Zheng. She raised her voice and kept apologizing to Lu Zheng. Lu Zheng's face darkened. He raised his hand and brushed away the lady's action of wiping him with a handkerchief. He looked angry. "I'm sorry. There are still clothes to change in the residence. Why don't you come to the guest house and change?" I'll arrange for a servant to send you away. Lu Jing did not say anything. He closed his eyes and hid his thoughts. Chapter 1646. What does Madam want to do? Just say it. Why beat around the bush and arouse suspicion? Several guesses floated through Lu Zheng's mind during the short distance from the main yard to the guest yard. Finally, he was sure that she wanted something from him. Lu Zheng didn't think that a woman he had only met once or twice would fall in love with him, especially since this madam had experienced too much. But she was still living peacefully. Naturally, she was an intelligent woman with a sharp mind. She couldn't be unaware of her husband's temperament. And Chui's two sworn brothers were boorish men who were illiterate to begin with. They had all the strength in their bodies, but not the slightest literary knowledge. To put it bluntly, they were bandits who didn't know what etiquette was. The worst side of men was vividly displayed in them. Whenever they saw a good-looking married woman, they would forcefully take her, never thinking that their behavior was wrong. Their logic was also quite interesting. Because the married woman was the spoils of war of the southern barbarians, they had saved this spoils of war from the southern barbarians. Therefore, they had the right to decide the spoils of war. Whether they forcefully took her or bestowed it to someone else, it was a matter of course. Lu Jing thought that this logic was wrong, but it was precisely the law of chaotic times. The strong had the right to freely distribute resources. Ants didn't have the right to be free. However, although they were ants, they also had the right to struggle. As soon as Lu Jing finished speaking, the two entered the guest yard. The madam turned around and bowed to him. "Madam, are you forcing me?" Was she trying to force a duck onto a perch, or was this moral coercion? "I do have a request." "I have no intention of forcing you." Lu Jing frowned slightly. He wasn't afraid of trouble, but he wouldn't accept anyone's trouble. It wasn't like he was overflowing with kindness and had nowhere to vent it. "Madam, why don't you tell me first? If I can help, I will naturally help. If not, you don't have to make this trip." Lu Jing didn't say anything definite, which could be considered as giving her a glimmer of hope. She waved her hand at the door that separated the outer and inner rooms of the guest courtyard. The simple door was opened, revealing a shy face. Lu Jing furrowed his brows and took a look. With his sharp eyes, he discovered that the handsome manservant with a red face and white teeth was a girl. She was not tall and her body was very skinny. Only her face was extremely beautiful. If she was properly nourished and her facial features developed, she would definitely be a beauty that could topple cities. "Madam, this is..." "Come here, quickly greet the teacher." The madam waved at the child and pulled him. "To tell you the truth, this child was born from my late husband and me." Back then, during the disaster of the southern barbarians, my late husband's family migrated, but they encountered an accident and unfortunately died. In order to avoid disaster, this servant had no choice but to hide the child and lead the southern barbarian bandits away by myself. Later I met this person. This servant then brought the child back. It's just that he's a very hot-tempered person. Whenever there's even the slightest sign of trouble, he'll get angry. Your servant had no choice but to lie and say that the child is my niece's son. In order to keep the blood of her mother's family, she wanted to keep them by her side so that they could eat. In the past few years she was fine, but as the child grew older, her face became like this servant's. Recently, it has become even more so. I had no choice but to find a way out for her. Lu Zheng was very smart. He knew what the madam had encountered the moment he heard this. A trace of disgust flashed in the depths of his eyes. According to the madam, when her husband had just met with misfortune in the morning, she had been abducted by the southern barbarians. Halfway through, she had been rescued by Chui's sworn brother, who had forcefully brought her back to his tent. In the face of these encounters, she had persevered and survived to raise her daughter. She had never expected that her daughter's appearance, which had inherited her and her late husband's merits, was even better than her own. As she grew older, Chui's sworn brother had actually taken a liking to her. "How old is she?" the madam said. "She's already in her golden years." 12? Lu Zheng was very shocked. The skinny girl in front of him looked at most 9 or 10 years old. Looking at her skinny appearance, her eyes seemed especially large, and her hair was yellow and sparse. However, beauty was in her bones, not in her skin. Even so, she was still outstanding. The madam smiled bitterly and said, 2 years ago, when he saw this child, he had designs on her. However, he was too young and immature, so he didn't make a move. My late husband only had this little bit of flesh and blood left. How could he make her come this far? For the past 2 years, he could only think of ways to treat her harshly. She lacked clothes and food. If not for his reluctance, he might have even disfigured her. Mother and daughter are connected by heart. How could I have wanted this? Lu Zheng said, "What do you plan to do?" The madam said, "Please take her, sir." Lu Zheng almost choked on his own saliva. The madam's words were too ambiguous. The madam also knew that she had said something wrong. She explained, "I know that sir already has a family. If you are interested, you can take her as a concubine. If you are kind, you can take her as your adopted daughter. In the future, her marriage will depend on her luck. She won't be a hindrance to sir." Lu Zheng said, "Madam, you really think highly of me." The madam said, "After seeing that beast's evil heart, no matter how bad sir is, he's still better than him." The more time passed, the more flustered she became. Today, Lu Zheng came to visit, so she couldn't care so much. If she missed Lu Zheng, her daughter's future would really be ruined. Lu Zheng thought about it again and finally agreed to help. He took the opportunity when In Chui's sworn brother was drunk to say that he had his eyes on one of the servants in his residence and wanted to take one. In this era, giving each other concubines was a good thing to say, let alone taking a servant. The other party was very drunk and agreed in a daze. When Lu Zheng left, the girl turned to look at the madam, but the corners of her eyes were filled with doubt and hatred. "What's your name?" Lu Zheng threw his cloak to her to protect her from the wind and cold. "This servant's surname is Kong, and my nickname is Xintong." Lu Zheng asked, "Do you know your mother's intentions?" He noticed that the girl's straw sandals were broken, and her exposed toes were blue from the cold. Her hands were also frostbitten, and her little face was purple from the wind. As intelligent as he was, he naturally saw the hatred in the girl's eyes. It also made him feel frightened. That hatred was about to materialize. The girl was silent for a long time, as if she didn't know how to answer this question. After a while, she said, "This servant thought, she was afraid that this servant would steal her husband, so she abused me in every possible way. Now, with just a few words, she has become a virtuous and loving mother. Forgive this servant for not being able to agree." Lu Zheng listened to the girl's eloquent words, which were completely different from her previous timid appearance. It was an eye-opener for him. This wasn't a timid cub, with sharp claws hidden under its meaty pads. "Then do you think that she sent you to me to stop you from stealing her favor? She harshly abused me every day, but now she says it's for my own good. Is there such a good thing in the world?" The girl said, "After father died, I didn't see her grieve for a single day. On that day, she went to another man's bed. This servant doesn't know, is this considered a good wife and mother?" Lu Zheng shook his head. Chapter 1647. It's reasonable for you to think that way. Lu Zheng didn't blame Kong Xintong. She was just a child who enjoyed her parents' love at a young age, but lost her loved ones overnight and couldn't understand her mother's pain. A child's thinking was different from an adult's. Adults could drag out an ignoble existence for a living, but a child's world was either black or white. The concept of gray had never existed. Lu Zheng was also a father, so he was naturally more tolerant and patient with children. The girl clenched her fists and gritted her teeth. "Sir, do you mean that you believe her flowery words?" She felt that her mother was ridiculous. When her father was still alive, he let her live a life of luxury. Outsiders often envied the couple. But what happened in the end? Less than a day after her father's death, she climbed onto another man's bed and nestled in his arms. She was like a parasite that could only cling to men and couldn't survive without a man. She didn't care about her ex-husband's daughter at all. In order to please her current husband, she even abused the girl in every possible way. She didn't have enough to eat or wear, and she was forced to wash buckets by the stream in the dead of winter. Rome wasn't built in a day. Similarly, the young girl's hatred towards her mother was not something that could be accumulated in 1 or 2 days, or even 1 or 2 incidents. Lu Jing didn't answer and asked instead, "Do you know what a person wants in a chaotic world?" The girl didn't understand. Lu Jing continued, "Living is not difficult for ordinary women. If they are willing to let go of their dignity, they don't mind being humiliated like dogs, and they don't mind living a muddle-headed life. Even if they fall into the hands of alien tribes, they can still survive. But living is easy, living with dignity is difficult. No matter how you look at it, your mother is a smart woman." Kang Xintong still stubbornly insisted on her own opinion. Lu Jing also lost the mood to go back and stay up for the new year. He stopped and took another path. He knew that the girl was stuck in a dead end. Simple chicken soup for the soul wouldn't wake her up. The best way was to slap her in the face with facts. "Actually, your mother is your stepfather's concubine, not his legal wife." On the way to the destination, Lu Zheng first gave the rebellious girl a heads-up to ensure that the effect would be the best. "Your stepfather was born in the wilderness. He was originally a rebel of the Red Lotus group in Dongqing. He married a wife in the countryside of Dongqing. It's just that those rural women are like weeds. Their colors are not bright, and they are abandoned in their hometown early on. It was very common for a man to leave his wife behind in his hometown and look for a new lover on the outside." LV Jing just wanted to tell the girl that a woman's face was indeed a weapon, but she couldn't use it as her most powerful weapon. Men covet color, but prefer freshness. Did you know that your stepfather had ill intentions towards you? I understand. Kang Xintong said stubbornly, even if that old man took advantage of me, how bad can my ending be? To me, if I can borrow this face and become that man's concubine, I can live a better life. Who wouldn't I give myself to? Lu Zheng's footsteps halted. He turned around and looked down at her, a mocking smile on his face. Then I'll let you see an ending that's 10,000 times worse than being someone's slave. After saying this, LV Jing grabbed Kang Xintong and walked a few steps forward. He had long legs and a long body, but Kang Xintong was small. She almost stumbled and fell. Her gaze fell on his hand that was pinching her wrist. LV Jing didn't touch her hand directly, but through his wide sleeve. LV Jing took her to the dark alley where the prostitutes gathered. He had never been to such a place before, but he had heard of it. He had seen it from afar when he was patrolling earlier, and the situation was terrible. Tonight was New Year's Eve. Logically speaking, every family should be celebrating the new year, but the dark alley was still lively. There were many low, dark doors in the alley, and women in dirty clothes leaned against the doors. Their ages ranged from 7 or 8 to 50 or 60. Most of these women were in a sorry state. Their cheeks were purplish-red from the cold wind, and some of their faces were covered with poor-quality makeup. Other than the stench of sweat and poor-quality makeup, there was also an indescribable smell in the air. When Kang Xintong passed by one of the women's short doors, the stench was even stronger. It was like a corpse that had been left in the hot summer for 7 or 8 days and hadn't been cleaned up. Even a thick layer of makeup couldn't hide the rancid smell. The woman's feet were covered with straw sandals, and her exposed ankles were covered with fine white pustules. Some of the pustules were already broken, and some were red from the woman's scratches. Kang Xintong's little face turned pale. LV Jing said, "Those leaning against the short doors are the prostitutes. These are still considered good. They can serve the guests and have a hut to shelter them from the wind and rain. Some of them just roll up a tattered mat and serve the guests in places with few people. Some of them are from good families, but most of them wander from place to place because of the persecution of the southern barbarians. Some of them were once the cheap concubines of rich families. Because of their old looks, they were despised and abandoned. They were sold to the broker house, and the broker house sold them to the brothel. The brothel has been receiving guests for 2 years, and they have changed from ordinary courtesans who receive one customer a day to the prostitutes who serve the peddlers. The number of customers they receive in a day is unknown. Not to mention silver and copper, they can even give themselves to a night's rancid rice bran. Other than these women in the dark alley, there were naturally men who patronized them. Kang Xintong glanced at them and found that their eyes were all on her. She immediately felt so disgusted that her hair stood on end. She grabbed LV Zheng's sleeves and caught up with him in small steps. Only then could she have some sense of security. LV Zheng was wearing brocade clothes. One look and one could tell that he wasn't a lowly person. Even if he were to linger in the brothel, he would go to a high-end and exquisite brothel to find a young and beautiful prostitute. The manservant beside him didn't dress well, but he was extremely handsome with a red face and white teeth. Such a combination didn't look like people who would linger in the brothel. For a moment, they attracted a lot of attention. However, these hooligans didn't dare to have any ideas. Even if they did, it would depend on whether the sword on LV Zheng's waist agreed. LV Zheng took Kang Xintong to walk through the dark alley. Kang Xintong came in with a puzzled face and went out with a pale face. You saw it all? LV Zheng looked at Kang Xintong's head and said calmly, Now, what else do you want to say? Kang Xintong suddenly felt disgusted. She grabbed LV Zheng's sleeves and turned her head to vomit out acid. Her mind was full of what she saw and heard just now. The house in the dark alley was very shabby. The movements inside the door couldn't be blocked by a door or a window. Because of the light, she couldn't see what was happening inside, but just listening to the movements made her shudder. The woman's heart-wrenching cries of pain and begging for mercy, the man's violent and heavy breathing and obscene words. Some houses were even more terrifying. There was only one woman in the house, but there was more than one man. Chapter 1648. She could not help but think of LV Zheng's previous words. It's easy to live, but it's hard to live with dignity. Kang Xintong did not dare to imagine that she would end up in such a situation many years later. After vomiting, she squatted down and wailed while hugging her knees, extremely resentful of her gender. Kang Xintong choked and said, Sir, all women in the world are like this. They are born to suffer. Why do women still exist? It's better to die since birth. So what if her mother did it for her own good? Did her mother disregard her wishes and thoughts and force her to suffer so much for her own good? What she thought was good, could it be that it was really good? Why didn't she ask herself which was better, a dignified and painless death or a dignified but oppressive and violent life? Violence and torture in the name of love, were they not abuse? LV Zheng interrupted her random thoughts at the right time. You have such messy thoughts because you have too little knowledge. It's just like how you only saw your mother's evil earlier. You don't know that all living beings suffer. Whether it's these women in the dark alley or other refugees who never have enough to eat, the most painful thing for them is not the torture inflicted on them, such as hunger and poverty. It's the endless torture that they can only be freed from until death. A person can't see the slightest bit of hope in life and can only live like a walking corpse. They don't even know why they're living, only knowing that they can live as long as they can. This kind of suffering without dignity is often more unbearable than physical torture. The common people could often endure physical torture, but they could not endure mental torture. The result of not being able to endure it was the idea of using death to escape like Kang Xintong. This was just going from a dead end to a dead end. What's the use of knowing more? Kang Xintong was, after all, a young girl who had just turned 12. Although her life was bumpy, she did not face the cruelest purgatory on earth. The world was still black and white. LV Zheng wanted to teach her what it meant to be gray. It's not that all women in the world are like this. It's just that the world is not stable. Anyone can fall into such a situation. LV Zheng said, using beauty to serve people is a shortcut, but not every shortcut can reach the same level. It was the same as using beauty to serve others, but there was also a difference in the target of serving others. If your target was your stepfather, the prostitutes in the dark alleys would most likely be the portrayal of the rest of your life. If your target was a noble with a high status and authority, or a hegemon who sat on the throne of the world, it would be a different situation. Isn't that because I'm inexperienced? Kang Xintong was speechless. After a while, she hung her head in embarrassment. I don't think I have that ability either. Kang Xintong knew that she had a good foundation and had inherited the best side of her biological parents. This could be seen from her stepfather's increasingly passionate and eccentric gaze these 2 years. Even though she was inexperienced, she knew what he was thinking. It was an undisguised, predatory look of a wild beast. Every time, her mother would panic and abuse her even more vigorously, which gave her an illusion. If that man was obedient to her, her mother would not dare to abuse her again. The repeated hints made her come up with this equation in her mind. Using her own body in exchange for power in the hands of a man, and using this to suppress her mother who bullied her, she could live a better life. Just as LV Zheng said, she was inexperienced, and her vision limited her imagination. The best choice she could think of was this, and the only target was her stepfather. Under such circumstances, how could she think that her beauty could attract someone who was more powerful than her stepfather? LV Zheng sighed and shook his head. Do you know who Lu Shi is? Kang Xintong shook her head. Even though Jiang Pingji was a famous and powerful feudal lord, not many people at the bottom of the hierarchy knew her. Dongqing was still all right. Jiang Pingji was quite well known. Many people knew the name of this feudal lord, where he was from, and whether he was a man or a woman. The people in Nanxing were more ignorant. It was good enough for them to know that there were other countries besides Nanxing, let alone feudal lords from other countries. They could not even maintain their lives, so how would they have the time to understand these things? Even if they wanted to, they had no corresponding channels. Lu Shi is a woman. Kang Xintong blinked in confusion and guessed, a stunning beauty? LV Zheng recalled the face of his childhood friend and shook his head to deny it. She was quite liked by the young ladies in Langyi County, but he had never heard of any man liking her. She had a nasty mouth and could not wait to gnash her teeth. On the contrary, Zixiao, who was known as the flower of Langyi County, was much more popular with men than that authentic woman. She is not a stunning beauty. It is true that she looks decent, but very few people pay attention to her face. Actually, no matter how ugly or beautiful she is, whether she is healthy or disabled, it is meaningless to her and the people around her. Kang Xintong asked, why is that? Because there are not many people in the world who are qualified to look directly at her face. When people bow down to her, they first see her feet and not her face. Kang Xintong asked again, is she the empress? Empress? LV Zheng curled his lips mockingly. No matter how noble the empress is, she still has to rely on her husband and her family. Once the country is destroyed, her husband no longer dotes on her, and her family abandons her. The empress, who is second only to one and above tens of thousands of people, will also fall into a dark alley. How can she be compared to her? Kang Xintong could not understand who the Lu Shi that the teacher was talking about was. Lu Shi was a woman, but she had a more noble status than the empress. Could she be the empress? She asked timidly. The one who is more noble than the empress is either the empress or the deities in heaven, Elvijing said. She is not the empress. After all, she did not announce to the world that she was going to ascend to the throne, but she is not far from being an empress in name only. A dynasty could be established in the land of Dongqing. Jiang Pingji, who occupied a territory larger than Dongqing, was naturally qualified to be the empress. However, her ambition was obviously not something that Dongqing could accommodate. Nanxing was also the target that the tip of her sword pointed at. Kang Xintong's small mouth opened wide as she listened. Her small face was full of shock. The higher you go, the further you can see. Even if you can't reach her level, looking at her, you can remember one thing. A woman's appearance is neither a blessing nor a curse. It is just a part of her that is given by her parents and is born with. Even though she is a woman, she is not born to crawl on the ground. LV Zheng smiled and flicked her forehead. He said, as long as you stand at a higher position than others, your appearance will only be the capital that they praise you. On the other hand, you will be the prey that they covet. Just like your mother, she is just a prey. Kang Xintong's lips turned pale as she listened. Your mother is indeed at fault, but she sincerely hoped that you could live with dignity. It was rare for LV Zheng to have the patience to say so much. Even he himself was surprised. If Wei Ci was also a salted fish in the streaming room, he could only express his feelings by clicking 666. You're tuning into the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.